The desert didn't forgive mistakes. Ethan Cross knew that better than most. He'd spent the last 8 years learning it the hard way. One scorched mile, one dry well, one close call at a time. The Nevada wasteland stretched endlessly in every direction, shimmering with heat that could cook a man's brain if he let it. But Ethan had long stopped letting things happen to him. He made his own path now. His horse, a gray mare named Ash, picked her way carefully across the cracked earth. She was tired. Hell, they both were. But Silver Creek sat just beyond the next ridge, and Ethan had been riding toward it for 8 years, even when he didn't know that's where he was headed. The town materialized slowly through the dust haze. False front buildings, crooked signs, a church steeple that leaned slightly left, like even God had given up trying to stand straight here. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, and somewhere a dog barked, the sound thin and desperate. Ethan reined Ash to a stop at the edge of town. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. The mine still dominated the eastern hills, Victor Hale's kingdom carved into rock and bone. The refinery belched black smoke into the pale sky. The company buildings sat like tombstones along Main Street, each one a reminder of who really owned Silver Creek. Not the people who lived here, not the families who'd built it. Victor Hale. Always Victor Hale. Ethan's jaw tightened, his right hand, scarred across the knuckles, the skin rough and uneven, rested on his thigh, inches from the Colt revolver at his hip. Old habit, the kind that kept a man breathing. Easy, he murmured to Ash. The mare's ears flicked back, listening. We're not here to start trouble. That was a lie, and they both knew it. He nudged Ash forward. The town swallowed them slowly. First the outskirts, where shacks leaned against each other like drunks, then the wider streets where merchants hawked their wares to miners with empty pockets and emptier eyes. Everyone looked worn down, used up, like the land itself had bled them dry. No one met Ethan's gaze as he rode past. That was new. 8 years ago, Silver Creek had been different. Rough, sure. Dangerous, absolutely. But alive. People had looked each other in the eye, laughed in the streets, argued over card games and horse trades. There'd been hope here once, buried under all the dust and violence. Now? Now it felt like a graveyard where the dead hadn't figured out they were supposed to lie down. Ethan guided Ash toward the Red Canyon Saloon. The building squatted in the center of town, 2 stories of weathered wood and broken promises. The painted sign above the door had faded to near invisibility, but Ethan didn't need it. He remembered. He'd been a deputy here once, 23 years old and stupid enough to believe in justice. Sheriff Thomas Marlowe had pinned the badge on his chest himself, told him he saw something special in the kid, told him Silver Creek needed men willing to stand up. Ethan had believed him, right up until the night Sheriff Marlowe caught a bullet in the back, and Ethan took 3 rounds himself, left for dead in an alley while the town pretended not to hear the gunfire. He dismounted slowly, his body remembering old wounds. The scars across his ribs pulled tight when he moved wrong. The doctors in Carson City had patched him up, told him he was lucky to be alive. Luck. Right. Lucky to have crawled through his own blood while Victor Hale's men burned the evidence and bought off the witnesses. Lucky to have spent 8 years drifting, healing, planning. Lucky to be back. Ethan tied Ash to the hitching post and stepped onto the boardwalk. His boots, worn but well-maintained, made solid sounds against the wood. Through the saloon's grimy windows, he could see shapes moving inside, hear the low murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses. He pushed through the doors. The interior was exactly as he remembered. Long bar to the left, scarred tables scattered across the floor, a staircase leading up to the rooms where the working girls plied their trade. The air smelled of whiskey, sweat, and something else, something rotten underneath, like meat gone bad. Fear. The place reeked of it. Every head turned when Ethan entered. Conversations died mid-sentence. The piano player's hands froze above the keys. Ethan walked to the bar, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. The bartender was new, a thick-necked man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He stared at Ethan with the wary look of someone who'd learned not to trust strangers. "Whiskey," Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than intended, dust-dry and harder than it used to be. The bartender didn't move. "You got money?" Ethan laid a coin on the bar. Silver, not the company script that Hale forced on the miners, Real money. The kind that meant independence. The bartender's eyes widened slightly. He grabbed a bottle and poured, his hand steady despite the tension radiating off him. Ethan took the glass and turned, leaning back against the bar. He scanned the room slowly, cataloging faces. Most were strangers, miners and drifters who'd arrived after he left. But there were familiar faces, too. Old men who'd aged badly. Women with hard eyes and harder smiles. None of them recognized him. Why would they? He'd been a clean-shaven kid with hope in his eyes back then. Now he was 31, weathered by desert sun and desert violence, with a beard that hid half his face and eyes that had seen too much. The conversations resumed, cautious and muted. Someone coughed. The piano player started up again, a melancholy tune that fit the mood. Ethan sipped his whiskey. It was garbage, rotgut that burned all the way down, but he'd had worse. The doors burst open. 3 men entered, moving with the swagger of those who'd never been told no. The Graves brothers. Ethan recognized them instantly, though they'd changed too. Older, meaner. The oldest, Marcus, had a scar bisecting his right eyebrow. The middle one, Jacob, walked with a limp. The youngest, Samuel, couldn't have been more than 25, but his eyes held the kind of cold calculation that usually took longer to develop. They were Victor Hale's enforcers, his fists. The men who did the dirty work while Hale stayed clean. Marcus Graves spotted Ethan immediately. His gaze sharpened, predatory. He nudged Jacob, jerked his chin toward the stranger at the bar. Ethan didn't move, didn't look away, just stood there, whiskey in hand, waiting. The brothers approached. The room went silent again, everyone suddenly very interested in their drinks. Marcus stopped 3 feet away. He was a big man, 6'2", maybe 220, with hands like hammers. "Don't know you," he said. "No," Ethan agreed. "You don't. You're sitting in our spot." Ethan glanced down at the bar, then back at Marcus. "Didn't see your name on it." Jacob laughed. A mean, sharp sound. "Funny guy. I like funny guys. They scream real entertaining-like when things go bad." Samuel said nothing. He just watched, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. Marcus leaned closer. His breath smelled like onions and tobacco. "Here's how this works, stranger. You finish that drink. You walk out. You get on your horse and you ride. Silver Creek don't need troublemakers." "Funny," Ethan said softly. "From where I'm standing, seems like Silver Creek's got plenty of trouble already." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus's face darkened. "You calling us trouble?" "I'm saying what I see." "Then maybe you need your eyes fixed." Ethan set his glass down on the bar. The clink seemed impossibly loud. "Or maybe you need to step back before this gets ugly." Jacob moved first. His hand dropped to his gun, fingers wrapping around the grip. But he was slow, whiskey slow, bully slow, the kind of slow that came from never having faced real danger. Ethan's hand was already moving. The Colt cleared leather in a blur of motion. One shot. Jacob's gun flew from his hand, his finger likely broken from the impact. He screamed and stumbled back, clutching his ruined hand. Samuel went for his weapon. Ethan pivoted, his second shot taking Samuel in the shoulder, deliberate, precise. The young man spun and hit the floor, blood spreading across his shirt. Marcus lunged. No gun, just rage and muscle. His fist came at Ethan's face like a freight train. Ethan ducked under the punch, stepped inside Marcus's guard, and drove the butt of his revolver into the man's temple. Marcus dropped like a sack of flour, unconscious before he hit the ground. 3 seconds. Start to finish. The saloon exploded into chaos. People scrambled for the exits. The bartender dove behind the bar. Somewhere, a woman screamed. Ethan stood in the center of it all, his Colt still smoking. He looked down at the Graves brothers, one unconscious, one cradling a broken hand, one bleeding from the shoulder, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just the cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Footsteps pounded on the boardwalk outside. The doors flew open and a man burst in, lean, weathered, wearing a sheriff's badge that looked about as legitimate as a $3 bill. "What the hell happened here?" the sheriff demanded, his hand on his gun. Ethan turned slowly. He recognized the badge, but not the man wearing it. "Self-defense," he said calmly. "They drew first." "That true?" The sheriff looked around the room. 30 witnesses, maybe 40. Not one of them spoke. Ethan watched them, these people who'd learned that speaking up meant getting hurt. Or worse. They'd seen what happened to those who challenged Victor Hale's authority. They'd buried friends and family who'd made that mistake. "Anyone?" the sheriff pressed. Still nothing. Jacob Graves stumbled to his feet, his good hand pressed against his broken one. "He's lying. We didn't—" "Shut up, Jacob." The sheriff's voice was tired. He looked at Ethan with something like pity. "What's your name, stranger?" Ethan considered lying, considered giving a false name and riding out before things got complicated, but he was done hiding, done running. "Cross," he said. "Ethan Cross." The sheriff's face went white. Behind him, someone gasped. The bartender dropped a glass, the crash sharp and final. "You're supposed to be dead," the sheriff whispered. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I get that a lot." The sheriff, his name was Wade, Ethan remembered now, one of Hale's creatures, took a step back. His hand tightened on his gun, but he didn't draw, couldn't draw, because even bought and paid for lawmen understood the difference between arresting a stranger and arresting a ghost. "Marcus," Wade said, his voice shaking slightly. "Get your brothers out of here. Get them to Doc Morrison." Marcus groaned, consciousness returning. Samuel was still on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Jacob looked like he might vomit. "You heard me," Wade snapped. "Move!" It took 5 minutes to get the Graves brothers out. 5 minutes of cursing and bleeding and barely controlled violence. The whole time, Ethan stood at the bar, his Colt still in hand, watching. When they were gone, Wade turned back to him. "You need to leave." "No." "Cross, listen to me. I'm done listening to men like you." Wade flinched. "Victor Hale runs this town, you know that. You knew it 8 years ago, and you know it now. He's got money, guns, lawyers. He's got everything. You're one man with a grudge. That's all it takes." "For what? To get yourself killed? To get other people killed?" Wade gestured around the saloon. "These folks got families, jobs, lives. They can't afford your vendetta." Ethan finally holstered his Colt. The weight of it at his hip was comforting, familiar. "Sheriff Marlowe had a family too," he said quietly. "A wife. A daughter. Did Hale think about them before he put a bullet in the sheriff's back?" Wade's jaw worked, but no words came out. "That's what I thought." Ethan picked up his whiskey and drained it in one swallow. The burn was almost pleasant. "I'm staying at the hotel. Anyone has a problem with that, they know where to find me." He walked toward the doors, aware of every eye on him. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. The faces staring at him were a mix of fear, confusion, and something else. Something he hadn't expected to see. Hope. Small and fragile and probably stupid, but hope nonetheless. 8 years ago, Ethan said, his voice carrying across the silent room, I wore a badge in this town. I believed in the law, in justice. I believed that good men could make a difference if they just stood up and fought. He touched the spot on his chest where the deputy's star used to rest. Then Victor Hale had Sheriff Marlowe murdered and tried to kill me too. And every single person in this town looked the other way, pretended they didn't see, didn't hear, didn't know. His eyes swept across them, hard and unforgiving. You made your choice that night. You chose safety over justice, fear over courage. Someone started to speak. Ethan cut them off. I'm not here to judge you for that. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I'm here because Victor Hale needs to answer for what he's done, and I'm going to make sure he does. He pushed through the doors and stepped into the dying light of late afternoon. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting Silver Creek in shades of gold and blood. Ash waited patiently at the hitching post, her eyes calm and knowing. Ethan untied her and walked her toward the hotel, his mind already working through what came next. Hale would know he was here within the hour. The Graves brothers would report back, wounds and all, and the mining baron would start calculating, planning, mobilizing his resources. That was fine. Ethan had resources too, not money or men or political connections, but he had something Victor Hale had forgotten existed, the truth, and the willingness to die for it. Gug. The Silver Creek Hotel stood 3 stories tall, the grandest building in town next to Hale's mansion on the hill. Ethan paid for a room on the 3rd floor, corner room, 2 windows, good sight lines. The clerk took his money without comment, though his hands shook slightly when he handed over the key. The room was sparse but clean. Bed, chair, wash basin. A window overlooking Main Street, another facing the alley. Ethan tested the locks, checked the floorboards, noted the escape routes. Old habits. He stripped off his duster and shirt, revealing the patchwork of scars that covered his torso. 3 bullet wounds, 1 in the left shoulder, 2 in the ribs, plus the knife scar across his stomach from a fight in Tucson, and the burn mark on his right forearm from a cooking fire gone wrong in the Sonora. 8 years of surviving. Ethan poured water into the basin and washed away the trail dust. The water turned brown immediately, swirling with the grime of 100 miles. He scrubbed his face, his neck, his hands. When he looked up, he barely recognized the man staring back from the cracked mirror. Hard eyes. Harder expression. The beard hid some of it, but not all. He looked like exactly what he'd become. A weapon aimed at Victor Hale's heart. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Ethan's hand moved to his Colt, but the knock that came was gentle, almost timid. "Mr. Cross?" A woman's voice. "May I speak with you?" Ethan dried his hands and pulled his shirt back on, leaving it unbuttoned. He opened the door carefully, keeping his body behind it. A woman stood in the hallway, 50, maybe 55. Gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that had once been blue but had faded to something closer to slate. She wore a simple dress, clean but worn, and her hands twisted together nervously. Ethan recognized her. Margaret Pritchard. She'd run the general store back when he was a deputy. A widow who'd raised 2 sons alone and never backed down from anyone. Now she looked diminished, smaller, like the years had carved away everything except the essential core. "Mrs. Pritchard," Ethan said quietly, "it's been a long time. You remember me?" "I remember everyone." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "May I come in? What I have to say, it's not for the hallways." Ethan stepped aside. She entered quickly, glancing both ways before he closed the door. Her nervousness was palpable, a living thing that filled the small room. "You shouldn't have come back," she said without preamble. "Probably not. Victor Hale will kill you, like he killed Thomas Marlowe, like he killed—" Her voice broke. "Like he killed my son." Ethan's chest tightened. "James?" She nodded, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. 2 years ago. He'd been working the mine, keeping his head down, but he saw something, some deal Hale was making with the railroad, stealing land from homesteaders. James had a conscience, God help him. He tried to go to the law. "Wade," Ethan said flatly. Sheriff Wade arrested James for trespassing on company property. The charges were nonsense, but they held him anyway. 3 days later, he was dead. They said it was a fight with another prisoner, said he fell wrong, hit his head. Margaret's hands clenched into fists. "My boy didn't fall. He was murdered. Everyone knows it. No one will say it." Ethan wanted to offer comfort, wanted to tell her it would be okay, that justice would prevail. But he'd stopped believing in lies. "What about your other son?" he asked instead. "Michael? He left. Couldn't stand it here anymore. Couldn't stand knowing that the men who killed his brother walk free." She looked up at Ethan, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "I don't want you to get yourself killed for us. We don't deserve it. We're cowards, every last one of us." "You're not a coward, Mrs. Pritchard." "I am. I watched them take my son, and I did nothing. I watched them bury him in a pauper's grave because Hale blacklisted our family, made sure we couldn't afford better. I stood there and I let it happen because I was afraid." "Fear doesn't make you a coward," Ethan said gently. "It makes you human." "Then what does action make you?" He considered the question, thought about the 8 years he'd spent preparing for this, the lives he'd taken, the lines he'd crossed. "Dangerous," he said finally. Margaret laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Good. Silver Creek needs dangerous. We've had safe for too long, and look where it's gotten us." She moved to the window and stared out at the town. Lights were starting to appear in windows as dusk settled. The mine's refinery still belched smoke, a constant reminder of who really controlled Silver Creek. "There are others like me," she said quietly. "People who've lost someone to Hale's greed, people who remember Sheriff Marlowe, who remember when this town had a chance." She turned back to Ethan. but they're scared, and they should be. Hale's got 40 men working for him, 40 hired guns who don't care about right or wrong, just about who's paying them. I'm not asking anyone to fight, Ethan said. Then what are you asking? Nothing. I'm not asking anything. But you're here. You shot 3 of Hale's men. You announced who you are. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You're planning something. Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because the truth was complicated and messy and probably suicidal. He was planning to tear Victor Hale's empire apart, brick by brick, to expose every crime, every theft, every murder, to force the people of Silver Creek to confront what they'd become, to choose, really choose, between comfort and justice. And if that got him killed, well, he'd made peace with that possibility a long time ago. Go home, Mrs. Pritchard, he said finally. Lock your doors. Stay out of sight. When this is over, one way or another, you'll know. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. My husband used to say that some men are born to settle, to build homes and raise families, to find their piece of ground and defend it. She moved toward the door. But other men are born to wander, to fight injustice, wherever they find it, to be the storm that clears the air. Your husband sounds like a wise man. He was a fool who got himself killed over a gambling debt. Margaret's smile was sad. But he was right about this. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. Ethan stood alone in the gathering darkness, listening to the town settle into night. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere else, men laughed. The forced, too loud laughter of those trying to forget their circumstances. The mine whistle blew, signaling the end of another shift, and Ethan could hear the shuffle of tired feet as workers trudged home. This was Victor Hale's kingdom, built on blood and maintained through fear, and Ethan Cross had just declared war on it. He finished dressing, checked his weapons, the Colt, plus the knife in his boot and the Derringer in his vest pocket, and settled into the chair by the window. Sleep would come later, if at all. For now, he watched and waited. The night deepened. Stars appeared, hard and bright and indifferent. And somewhere up on the hill, in his mansion of stolen wealth, Victor Hale began to plan how to kill a ghost. But ghosts, Ethan had learned, were harder to kill the second time around. Dawn broke over Silver Creek like a wound reopening. Ethan hadn't slept. He'd sat in that chair all night, watching the streets below, cataloging movements and patterns. The town had its rhythms, miners shuffling to work before sunrise, shopkeepers opening their doors, women carrying water from the communal pump. Normal life, or what passed for it in a place where normalcy meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. He'd counted 17 men who moved differently, harder. They didn't shuffle or hurry. They walked with purpose, their eyes scanning, hands never far from weapons. Hale's men, scattered throughout town like sentries, making sure everyone remembered who really gave the orders around here. Around 4 a.m, a rider had galloped up the hill toward Hale's mansion. 30 minutes later, he'd come back down and stopped at 6 different locations, spreading the word. By sunrise, every one of Hale's hired guns would know that Ethan Cross was alive and breathing Silver Creek's air. Good. Let them know. Let them worry. Ethan stood, his joints protesting. He was getting too old for all-night vigils, but age was just another scar to carry. He splashed water on his face, strapped on his gun belt, and headed downstairs. The hotel dining room smelled of coffee and bacon grease. A handful of early risers sat at scattered tables, shoveling food into their mouths with the mechanical efficiency of people who'd forgotten what pleasure tasted like. They all looked up when Ethan entered. All looked away just as fast. He took a table in the corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door. The waitress, a thin woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, approached cautiously. "Coffee," Ethan said, "and whatever's cooking." She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. The coffee arrived first, black and bitter. Ethan wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling the heat seep into his palms. 8 years ago, he'd sat in this same dining room, planning patrols with Sheriff Marlowe. They'd drunk coffee just like this, made plans to clean up Silver Creek, believed they could actually make a difference. Fools. Both of them. The food came. Eggs, bacon, biscuits. Ethan ate mechanically, fueling his body without tasting. Around him, conversations resumed in hushed tones. He caught fragments. His name. The Graves brothers. Speculation about what Hale would do. Fear. Always fear. He was finishing his coffee when Sheriff Wade walked in. The lawman looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform wrinkled. He spotted Ethan immediately and crossed the room with heavy steps. "Mind if I sit?" Wade asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Free country," Ethan said. Wade pulled out a chair and dropped into it. He didn't order anything, just sat there staring at the table like it held answers. Finally, he spoke. "I rode out to the Hale place last night. Told him you were back." "I figured." He wasn't surprised. Said he'd been expecting you for years, said men like you don't just disappear. Wade's hands clenched on the table. "He wants to meet with you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Does he now?" "Neutral ground, the church, noon today. Just you and him. No guns." "And you believe that?" Wade's laugh was bitter. "I don't believe anything anymore, Cross. But those are his terms. Said if you don't show, he'll assume you're just another coward hiding behind a gun." "Trying to bait me?" "Probably." Wade leaned forward. "Listen, I know what you think of me. I know what I am. But I'm asking you, man to man, don't do this. Take whatever revenge you came for and leave, tonight, before this gets worse." "How could it get worse?" Ethan asked softly. "Your town's already dead. The people are scared. The law's a joke. Victor Hale murders anyone who crosses him and faces zero consequences. What's worse than that? War," Wade said flatly. "Real war. Right now it's just you and the Graves brothers. Contained. Manageable. But if you push this, if you actually go after Hale, people will die. Innocent people. The kind who can't defend themselves. They're already dying, just slower, quieter." Wade stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Noon, the church. That's all I'm telling you." He started to walk away, then stopped. "For what it's worth. I'm sorry about Sheriff Marlowe. He was a good man. Deserved better than what he got." "We all do," Ethan said. Wade left. The dining room went silent again, everyone pretending they hadn't been listening. Ethan finished his coffee and dropped coins on the table. Time to move. The morning sun was already brutal, turning Silver Creek into an oven. Ethan walked Main Street slowly, taking in details he'd missed in yesterday's dust and chaos. The general store, Pritchard's old place, now had different owners, their sign freshly painted. The blacksmith's forge stood quiet, no smoke rising. The doctor's office had bars on the windows. Everything felt locked down, fortified, like a town under siege. He passed the old sheriff's office. The building looked abandoned now, windows dark, door hanging crooked on its hinges. Someone had painted over the name on the window, but Ethan could still make out the ghost of the letters. Thomas Marlowe, Sheriff. His chest tightened. "You shouldn't stare too long." Ethan turned. An old man sat on a bench outside the barber shop, whittling a piece of wood with gnarled hands. He was ancient, 70, maybe older, with skin like leather and eyes that had seen too much. "Why's that?" Ethan asked. "Draws attention. And attention in this town gets you buried." The old man squinted up at him. "Though I suppose you already know that, don't you, Deputy Cross?" Ethan moved closer. Recognition flickered. "Henry Dawson. So you do remember. Most folks pretend they don't know me anymore. Easier that way." Henry kept whittling, shavings falling at his feet. "I was there, the night they killed Marlowe. Heard the shots. Saw you dragging yourself down the alley, bleeding like a stuck pig." "Why didn't you help?" "Because I'm a coward." Henry said it simply, without shame or apology. "I was 58 years old. Had a wife dying of consumption, 2 grandkids depending on me. So I closed my door and pretended I didn't see anything." "She die? Your wife?" 6 months later, lungs gave out. Henry finally looked up from his carving. "Want to know the funny part? I thought I was protecting her. Thought if I kept quiet, Hale would leave us alone. But he didn't pay her medical bills, didn't help when we couldn't afford food. My silence bought me exactly nothing except the knowledge that I'm a coward." Ethan sat down on the bench beside him. "You're still here. That takes something. Stubbornness isn't courage." Henry resumed whittling. "Your horse is at the livery. Saw them bring her in last night. Big gray mare, right? She's being fed and watered. No charge." "Who's running the livery?" "Pete Hutchins. You won't remember him. Came after your time. But he remembers Marlowe. Everyone over 40 remembers Marlowe." Henry's knife paused. There are more of us than you'd think. People who remember when Silver Creek wasn't Hale's private kingdom. We're old now, tired, but we remember. Memory isn't enough. No, Henry agreed. But it's a start. Footsteps on the boardwalk. Both men looked up. A young woman approached, maybe 25, with auburn hair pulled back and a determined set to her jaw. She wore a simple dress and carried a basket, but there was something about her bearing, a kind of controlled intensity, that marked her as different. "Mr. Dawson," she said, nodding at Henry. Then her eyes found Ethan. "Mr. Cross, I was hoping I'd find you." "Do I know you?" Ethan asked. "No, but I knew my father. Thomas Marlowe was his name. I'm Sarah, his daughter." Everything stopped. Ethan stood slowly, his mind racing. Sarah Marlowe. She'd been 14 when he last saw her, a gangly kid with braces and her father's blue eyes. Now she was a woman, and those eyes held the same steel her father's had. "Sarah," he managed, "I thought you left town after they murdered my father?" "I did. My mother and I went to San Francisco. She remarried, told me to forget Silver Creek, forget everything." Sarah's hands tightened on her basket. "I couldn't. I tried for years, but I couldn't, so I came back 6 months ago." "Why?" "Because someone has to remember. Someone has to bear witness." She glanced at Henry, then back to Ethan. "I've been documenting everything. Every theft, every assault, every suspicious death. I've talked to miners who've been cheated, families who've lost land, women who've been—" She trailed off, her jaw clenching. "Victor Hale has committed crimes that would fill a book. But there's no law here, no justice, just power." "You're going to get yourself killed," Ethan said bluntly. "Maybe, but at least I'll die knowing I tried." Sarah reached into her basket and pulled out a leather journal, worn and stuffed with loose papers. "This contains 8 months of evidence. Names, dates, witnesses. Everything I could gather without getting caught. I've been waiting for someone who could actually use it." She held it out to Ethan. He stared at the journal like it was a snake. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Whatever you came here to do. But do it informed. Do it right." Sarah's voice softened. "My father believed in you. He told my mother that you were special, that you had something most deputies didn't, a conscience that wouldn't quit. He said you'd make a fine sheriff someday." "He was wrong," Ethan said harshly. "I ran. I survived while he died. I'm no hero, Miss Marlowe. I'm not asking for a hero. I'm asking for someone angry enough to actually fight back." She thrust the journal at him. "Take it. Read it, then decide." Ethan took the journal. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with months of careful documentation and barely suppressed rage. He flipped it open. The first page was a list of names under the heading, "Murdered by Hale's Order." Thomas Marlowe was at the top. James Pritchard appeared halfway down. Ethan recognized other names, good people who'd asked too many questions or refused to kneel. 23 names. 23 murders covered up, explained away, forgotten by everyone except Sarah Marlowe. "The meeting at the church," Sarah said. "You're going." It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "Don't. It's a trap. Hale doesn't do neutral ground. He doesn't negotiate. He eliminates threats." She moved closer, her voice urgent. "There are 40 guns loyal to Hale in this town. At least a dozen will be positioned around that church, no matter what promises he makes. You walk in there alone and you won't walk out." "I've walked into worse." "Then you're a fool," Henry chuckled from his bench. "He knows he's a fool, girl. All the best men are." Sarah ignored him, her eyes locked on Ethan's. "My father died because he underestimated Victor Hale. He thought the badge meant something, thought the law would protect him. Don't make the same mistake." "I'm not your father," Ethan said quietly. "And I stopped believing in the law 8 years ago." "Then what do you believe in?" Ethan looked down at the journal in his hands. 23 names. 23 people who died because nobody fought back hard enough or smart enough or dirty enough to stop a man like Hale. "Consequences," he said. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Keep the journal. Use it or burn it. I don't care. But know that everything in there is true. I verified every claim myself. And if you need witnesses, there are people willing to testify. They're scared, but they're ready." "Ready for what?" "For someone to lead." Sarah's smile was sad. "You keep saying you're not a hero, Mr. Cross. But you're here. You came back when every sane person would have run the other direction. That makes you either very brave or very stupid. Definitely stupid, Henry muttered. Sarah started to leave, then paused. One more thing. There's a man named Luis Cordero. He works in Hale's refinery, managing the accounts. 3 weeks ago, his wife got sick. Really sick. Hale refused to pay for a doctor, said the company insurance didn't cover family members. Luis's wife died last week. I'm sorry, Ethan said. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Luis hates Hale now. Really hates him. And he has access to financial records that could prove embezzlement, fraud, maybe worse. Sarah met his eyes. If you want to hurt Victor Hale, the guns are only one way. The other way is through his money, his reputation, his carefully constructed image of legitimacy. Where can I find Luis? He works nights, stays late in the refinery office going through numbers. He's there until midnight most days. She smiled grimly. Just a thought. If you survive the church meeting, that is. She walked away before Ethan could respond, her basket swinging at her side, looking for all the world like a woman running errands instead of plotting rebellion. Henry set down his whittling. That girl's got more courage than the rest of us combined. She's going to get hurt. Probably, but she's already hurt. Lost her father, lost her innocence, came back to this hellhole anyway. Henry stood with a groan, his joints popping. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Ethan looked down at the journal again, flipped through pages filled with Sarah's neat handwriting, dates, times, witness statements, evidence that should have put Hale in prison 10 times over if anyone had the spine to use it. I don't know yet, he admitted. We'll figure it out quick, because noon's coming whether you're ready or not. Henry clapped him on the shoulder with surprising strength. For what it's worth, I'm glad you came back. Even if it ends badly, at least someone's finally standing up. The old man shuffled away, leaving Ethan alone with 23 names and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. He spent the next 2 hours in his hotel room, reading Sarah's journal cover to cover. Every page was a punch to the gut. Hale's crimes weren't just murder and intimidation. He'd stolen land through forged deeds, forced miners into debt slavery with company scrip, manipulated supply lines to drive up prices, bribed officials in Carson City to look the other direction. The financial records Sarah described, if Luis Cordero really had them, could expose everything. Could bring down not just Hale, but the entire corrupt system propping him up. But first, Ethan had to survive the church meeting. He checked his weapons methodically. The Colt revolver, cleaned and loaded. The knife in his boot, freshly sharpened. The Derringer in his vest pocket, a last resort. He wasn't naive enough to think Hale would play fair, but he was curious what the man wanted. What game he was playing. At 11:30, Ethan left the hotel. The church stood at the north end of town, a whitewashed building with a crooked steeple and cracked windows. It had been beautiful once, back when people still believed in things like salvation and redemption. Now it looked like everything else in Silver Creek, worn down and half forgotten. Ethan approached carefully, scanning roof lines and windows. Sarah was right. Armed men were positioned everywhere. He counted at least 8, maybe more. They weren't even trying to hide, just standing there, rifles visible, making sure everyone knew this was Hale's town. The church doors stood open. Inside, dim light filtered through dusty windows. Pews sat empty, gathering dust. At the front, near the altar, a man stood waiting. Victor Hale. Ethan had spent 8 years imagining this moment, rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd feel. But seeing Hale in the flesh stripped away all his carefully prepared speeches. The mining baron looked older, grayer, but still powerful, still confident. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most families in Silver Creek made in a year. His hands were clean, soft, uncalloused. The hands of a man who'd never done real work, who'd built his empire on other people's sweat and blood. Deputy Cross, Hale said, his voice smooth and cultured. Or should I say former Deputy Cross? I confess, I'm not sure of the proper etiquette when addressing a dead man. Ethan walked down the center aisle slowly, his boots echoing in the empty space. He stopped 10 feet from Hale, his hand resting casually near his Colt. Just Cross is fine. Very well, Cross. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Didn't have much choice. You made it pretty clear what happens if I don't play along. Hale smiled. Did I? I don't recall making any threats. I simply suggested a conversation. Two civilized men discussing a mutual problem. What problem is that? You. Hale gestured around the empty church. You've returned to Silver Creek after 8 years, shot 3 of my employees, and announced your presence in the most dramatic way possible. That creates complications. Your boys started it. Perhaps. The Graves brothers can be overzealous. But that's beside the point. Hale stepped closer. You want revenge for what happened to Thomas Marlowe. I understand that. In your position, I might feel the same way. But revenge is a young man's game, Cross. And you're not that young anymore. Get to the point. The point is this. I'm prepared to make you an offer. A generous one. $50,000, deposited in any bank you choose, in exchange for you leaving Silver Creek and never returning. You can buy a ranch, start a business, live whatever life you want, somewhere far from here. Ethan laughed. He couldn't help it. The sheer audacity of it. You think I came back here for money? Everyone comes back for money, eventually, or power, or security. Hale's expression didn't change. You're not special, Cross. You're just another man with a grudge and a gun. The world is full of you, and the world keeps turning because men like me make the difficult decisions, build the infrastructure, create the jobs that keep people fed. By murdering anyone who gets in your way, by doing what's necessary. Hale's voice hardened slightly. You think I enjoy this? You think I wanted to kill Thomas Marlowe? He was a good man, an honorable man, but he couldn't see the bigger picture. He wanted to enforce laws written by people who'd never built anything, never risked anything, laws that would have destroyed everything I'd created here. You created a prison. I created civilization in the middle of nowhere. Before me, Silver Creek was 30 tents and a hole in the ground. I brought order, employment, a future. Hale spread his hands. Are my methods harsh sometimes? Yes, but harsh times require harsh measures. You were a lawman. You should understand that better than anyone. Ethan felt his anger rising, hot and familiar. I understand that you murdered my friend and tried to kill me. I understand that you've turned this town into your personal kingdom, where you decide who lives and who dies. And I understand that you think money can make me forget all of that. Not forget. I'm not naive enough to think you'd forget. Hale's smile returned, colder now. But I am asking you to be practical. You're one man. I have resources you can't imagine. Even if you kill me, which, let's be honest, is unlikely, my organization continues. My lawyers, my connections in Carson City, my business partners in San Francisco and Denver. You'd be fighting an entire system, Cross, and systems don't lose to individuals. We'll see. No, Hale said softly. We won't, because here's what's going to happen if you refuse my offer. First, I'll have you arrested for assault on the Graves brothers. Sheriff Wade will process the paperwork. You'll be held in jail, pending trial, and accidents happen in jail, as I'm sure you're aware. Your pet sheriff already tried threatening me. That wasn't a threat. It was a preview. Hale's eyes went flat and dead. If the jail doesn't work, there are other methods. You'll be ambushed on a dark road, shot from a distance, made to disappear in a way that doesn't create martyrs or legends. And then I'll move on to the people you've spoken with. Margaret Pritchard, Sarah Marlowe, that old fool Henry Dawson. Anyone who might have helped you will face consequences. Ethan's hand tightened on his gun. You hurt them and what? You'll kill me from beyond the grave? Hale laughed. Don't be dramatic. This is business, always has been. You're a problem. Problems get solved. The only variable is how much collateral damage occurs in the process. You're right about one thing, Ethan said quietly. I'm not special. I'm just a man with a gun and a grudge. But you know what? Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes one person standing up is enough to remind everyone else that they don't have to kneel. Inspiring speech. Very cowboy of you. Hale checked his pocket watch. You have until sunset to accept my offer. After that, we do this the hard way. And I promise you, Cross, the hard way ends with you in a wooden box and everyone you've talked to wishing they'd never met you. I'll take my chances. Then you're a fool, but I suspected as much. Hale started toward the door, then paused. One last thing. Thomas Marlowe died because he thought the law was stronger than money. He thought right would triumph over might. He died wrong and alone in an alley, bleeding out while the town he'd tried to save pretended not to hear his screams. Learn from his mistake. The law is a fairy tale for children. Power is what matters. And I have all the power here. Hale walked out, his footsteps confident and unhurried. Ethan stood alone in the empty church, his heart pounding, his mind racing. The smart play was to take the money and run. $50,000 was more than he'd see in 5 lifetimes of honest work. He could disappear, start over, live. But then he'd spend the rest of his life knowing he'd back down, that he'd let Hale win, that Thomas Marlowe died for nothing, and Sarah's journal would gather dust. Luis Cordero's wife would remain unavenged. 23 names would stay buried and forgotten. No more running. Ethan left the church and headed straight for the refinery. The industrial complex sprawled across the eastern edge of town, a maze of machinery and smokestacks. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but they were focused outward, watching for thieves and saboteurs. They weren't expecting someone to walk straight through the front gate. Ethan moved with purpose, like he belonged there. Confidence was armor. Most people didn't question someone who acted like they had every right to be somewhere. He found the office building easily enough, a 2-story structure separated from the main refinery. Lights burned in the upper windows. Someone working late, just like Sarah said. Ethan climbed the exterior stairs and tried the door. Unlocked. Inside, a narrow hallway led to several offices. One door showed light underneath. He knocked. "Come in," a tired voice called. Ethan entered. A man sat hunched over a desk covered in ledgers and papers, his eyes red from strain. Mid-40s, thinning hair, wearing spectacles and ink-stained shirt sleeves. This had to be Luis Cordero. Luis looked up. His eyes widened. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "My name's Ethan Cross. I'm here about your wife." All color drained from Luis's face. "Get out, right now, before someone sees you. I know Hale refused to pay for her doctor. I know she died because of it, and I know you want him to pay." Luis stood, his hands shaking. "You don't know anything. You need to leave. If they find you here, they'll kill us both." "Probably," Ethan agreed. "But they're going to kill you anyway, eventually. Men like Hale don't leave loose ends. You know too much, seen too much. Right now you're useful, but the moment you're not..." Luis sank back into his chair. His hands covered his face. When he spoke, his voice was muffled and broken. Elena was 32 years old. We'd been married 10 years. She got sick, and I begged. I begged Hale for help, for an advance on my salary, for anything. He said company policy didn't allow it, that I should have saved money instead of spending it on luxuries. I'm sorry. We didn't have luxuries. We had rent and food, and that was it. But Hale doesn't care. He doesn't see people. Just numbers in his ledgers. Luis looked up, his eyes wet. I've spent 3 weeks going through these books. Every night, after everyone leaves. Do you know what I've found? Tell me. Hale's been embezzling from his own company, skimming profits, manipulating accounts, hiding money in shell corporations. The mine is barely profitable anymore. The good veins played out years ago. But he keeps it running by cheating workers, cutting corners on safety, and cooking the books to convince investors everything's fine. Ethan leaned forward. Can you prove it? I can do better than that. I can show you exactly where the money went, who he bribed, which officials turned blind eyes, which politicians owe him favors. Luis's laugh was bitter. He trusts me because I'm quiet and boring and forgettable. Never thought the boring accountant might actually pay attention. Give me the evidence. I'll make sure it gets to the right people. There are no right people. The territorial governor is in Hale's pocket. The judges, too. You think they'll prosecute their benefactor? Luis shook his head. The system is broken. Hale broke it. Then we break it further, make enough noise that they can't ignore it. Ethan pulled out Sarah's journal. This contains witness statements, names and dates. Your financial records prove the money trail. Together, it's enough to force action. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Luis stared at the journal. His hands trembled as he reached for it, then pulled back. If I help you, I'm a dead man. If you don't help, you're a dead man who watched his wife die for nothing. The words were harsh. Ethan knew it. But sometimes harsh was necessary. Luis closed his eyes, took a deep breath, opened them again. There's a safe in Hale's private office, in his mansion. He keeps the most incriminating documents there. The ones he can't risk anyone else seeing. Deeds to stolen property, proof of murders, records of bribes. He pulled a key from his pocket. This opens the service entrance. The guards change shift at 2 in the morning. You'd have 15 minutes, maybe 20, before someone notices. Ethan took the key. You're sure about this? No, I'm not sure about anything anymore. But Elena deserved better. Everyone in this town deserves better. Luis returned to his ledgers, his shoulders hunched. Take what you need. Do what you have to do. And if they kill me for it, at least I'll die knowing I tried to make things right. Ethan left before he could say something stupid and sentimental. Luis Cordero was a good man in an impossible situation, and good men usually died first. But maybe, just maybe, his evidence would matter, would make a difference. Outside, the night had fully descended. Ethan made his way back toward the hotel, his mind already working through the logistics of breaking into Hale's mansion. It was insane, suicidal, exactly the kind of move that would get him killed. Perfect. He was halfway down Main Street when he heard the commotion, shouting, running feet, a woman's scream. Ethan's hand went to his Colt as he rounded the corner. A crowd had gathered outside the general store. In the center, Sheriff Wade stood over a man on the ground, young, maybe 20, bleeding from a split lip. I told you the rent was due yesterday, Wade was saying, his voice cold. Hale don't accept excuses. I don't have it, the young man gasped. My wife just had a baby. The medical bills... Wade kicked him in the ribs. The crowd flinched but didn't intervene. Not his problem. You signed the lease. You pay or you get out. Ethan pushed through the crowd. That's enough. Wade turned, his eyes narrowing. This doesn't concern you, Cross. It concerns me when I see a lawman beating a kid in the street. I'm enforcing a legal contract. The boy owes rent on company property. He refuses to pay. That's trespassing. Wade's hand drifted to his gun. Walk away. This is official business. Official business, Ethan repeated. He looked at the young man on the ground, then at the crowd. Anyone else think this looks official? Silence. But he saw it in their faces, the shame, the anger, the helplessness. They knew this was wrong. They just didn't know how to stop it. I'll pay his rent, Ethan said. Wade blinked. What? You heard me. How much does he owe? $60. Highway robbery for a month's rent, but Ethan pulled out his wallet and counted bills. He handed them to Wade. There, debt paid. Now leave him alone. Wade took the money, his jaw tight. You're making a mistake, Cross. Hale gave you until sunset. You should have taken his offer. Yeah, Ethan said. I'm good at making mistakes. The sheriff left, taking his authority and his violence with him. Ethan helped the young man to his feet. Up close, he looked even younger, barely 20, with a sparse beard and terrified eyes. Thank you, the kid whispered. I don't know how I'll repay. Don't worry about it. Just take care of your family. The crowd dispersed slowly, shooting Ethan glances that ranged from grateful to worried. He knew what they were thinking. He'd just painted a bigger target on his back, made it personal. Hale would hear about this within the hour. Good. Let him hear. Let him know that someone finally refused to back down. Ethan returned to his hotel room and laid out his gear. The Colt, extra ammunition, the knife, Luis's key, Sarah's journal, everything he'd need for what came next. Breaking into Hale's mansion was a long shot. Getting the evidence out was even longer. But sometimes long shots were all you had. He sat in the darkness, waiting for 2 in the morning, waiting for the guards to change shift, waiting for his chance to strike at the heart of Victor Hale's empire. Outside his window, Silver Creek settled into uneasy sleep. Somewhere, Sarah Marlowe was documenting another day of injustice. Luis Cordero was probably still hunched over his ledgers, searching for more ammunition. Margaret Pritchard was thinking about her murdered son. Henry Dawson was whittling and remembering when he'd had the courage to act. And in his mansion on the hill, Victor Hale was planning how to crush this problem once and for all. The clock ticked toward 2, toward violence, toward whatever came next. Ethan checked his weapons one final time and headed into the night. The mansion stood like a crown on Silver Creek's highest hill, visible from every corner of town, a constant reminder of who held power. Ethan had studied it from his hotel window, memorizing the layout, counting guards, timing their rotations. Now, crouched in the shadows of the service entrance at 1:50 in the morning, he slid Luis's key into the lock. It turned smoothly, too smoothly. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to abort, to walk away, but he was already committed. He eased the door open and slipped inside, his Colt drawn and ready. The servants' corridor was dark and empty, smelling of lye soap and old cooking grease. Moonlight filtered through high windows, casting everything in shades of gray. He moved quickly but carefully, his boots silent on the hardwood floors. Luis had sketched a rough map. The private office was on the second floor, northwest corner. 3 hallways, 2 staircases, past the trophy room where Hale displayed his conquests like a hunter's kills. The house felt wrong, too quiet. No creaking boards, no distant sounds of guards making rounds. Just silence, thick and waiting. Ethan reached the main staircase, froze. A light flickered in the upstairs hallway. Not a lantern or candle. Electric light, the expensive kind Hale had installed to show off his wealth. Someone was awake. He climbed anyway, each step measured and deliberate. At the top, the hallway stretched in both directions. Left led to the bedrooms, right to the office. The light came from the right. Of course it did. Ethan checked his Colt. 6 rounds, 1 in each chamber. Not enough if this went sideways, but enough to make a statement. He moved down the hallway, keeping to the wall, his shadow trailing behind him like a ghost. The office door stood open. Victor Hale sat behind a massive oak desk, reading a newspaper by electric lamplight. He didn't look up when Ethan entered, just kept reading, utterly calm. "You're 3 minutes early," Hale said. "I expected you at 2 exactly. The guards changed shift then, creating a 15-minute window. Luis Cordero told you that, I assume." Ethan's blood went cold. "Where is he?" "Luis?" "Probably in his bed, sleeping poorly, and wondering if he made a terrible mistake." Hale finally looked up, his expression mild. "He didn't betray you intentionally, if that's what you're thinking. But I've employed him for 12 years. I know how he thinks. I knew the moment his wife died that he'd become a liability." "You planned this." "I planned for contingencies. There's a difference." Hale set down his newspaper and gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have things to discuss." "I'll stand." "Suit yourself." Hale opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "You wanted evidence? Here. Financial records showing every bribe, every theft, every crime I've committed in the last 20 years. Names, dates, amounts, everything you could possibly need to destroy me." He slid the folder across the desk. Ethan didn't move. "What's the catch?" "No catch. It's all real, authenticated, admissible in any court in the territory." Hale smiled. "The problem isn't obtaining evidence, Cross. It's finding someone willing to act on it. The territorial governor owes me $40,000. The chief justice in Carson City? His son works for one of my shell corporations. The federal marshals? Half of them are on my payroll. Someone will listen. Will they? Let's say you ride to Carson City tomorrow, present all this evidence to whoever's left who isn't already compromised. What happens then?" Hale leaned back in his chair. "Investigations take months, years sometimes. During that time, witnesses disappear, records go missing. People who seemed brave in Silver Creek suddenly develop amnesia when facing my lawyers. You can't kill everyone." "I don't have to. I just have to kill enough people that the rest learn to keep quiet." Hale's smile never wavered. "You think you're the first person to try bringing me down? Thomas Marlowe tried. He gathered evidence, talked to witnesses, built what he thought was an airtight case. Where did it get him? A bullet in the back." "Exactly. Because evidence doesn't matter when the system itself is corrupted. You can have all the proof in the world, Cross. You can expose every crime I've ever committed, and it still won't matter because the people with the power to stop me won't use it. They need me. They profit from me. I'm the foundation their own empires are built on." Ethan's hand tightened on his Colt. It would be so easy. One shot. End it right here. But shooting Hale accomplished nothing if the system that enabled him remained intact. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked. "Because I want you to understand. I want you to see the game board clearly before you make your next move." Hale stood and walked to the window, looking down at his town. "You came back for revenge, for justice, noble goals. But revenge is empty, and justice is a luxury only the powerful can afford. What you should be seeking is change, real, lasting change. And you're going to teach me how? No. I'm going to show you why it's impossible. Hale turned back. Even if you kill me tonight, even if you put a bullet in my head and ride out of here, nothing changes. My lawyers execute my will. My business partners absorb my assets. Someone else steps into my role, probably someone worse. The machine keeps running because it's bigger than any one person. Then I'll break the machine. With what? Good intentions? Sarah Marlowe's journal? Luis Cordero's ledgers? Hale laughed. You need an army, Cross. You need resources. You need political power and legal authority and 100 things you don't have and can't get. You're one man with a gun. That's enough to kill me. It's not enough to change anything that matters. Ethan heard the truth in Hale's words and hated it. Hated that this monster was right. Hated that 8 years of planning and preparing and dreaming of justice had led to this moment, standing in the enemy's stronghold, realizing the enemy had already won. So what's your offer this time? Ethan asked bitterly. Another 50,000 to disappear? No offer, just reality. Hale returned to his desk. You have until dawn to leave Silver Creek. I've arranged a wagon at the south edge of town. There's food, water, and $5,000 in gold. Enough to get you anywhere you want to go. Take it or don't. But if the sun rises and you're still here, we proceed to unpleasant necessities. Unpleasant for who? Everyone. Me included. For the first time, Hale's expression showed something like regret. I don't enjoy killing, Cross. I'm not a monster who delights in violence. I'm a businessman who does what's necessary to protect his interests. You make me kill you. I will. You make me kill Luis Cordero and Sarah Marlowe and everyone else who helped you. I'll do that too. But I'll hate it. I'll lose sleep over it. Does that make it better? No. Does it change the outcome? Also no. Ethan studied the man who'd destroyed his life. Hale wasn't lying. That was the worst part. He really did regret the violence. He really would lose sleep. But he'd do it anyway because he'd convinced himself it was necessary. That he was the hero of his own story, making hard choices for the greater good. Thomas Marlowe believed the law was stronger than money, Ethan said quietly. You killed him for it. What do you believe in, Hale? Survival, efficiency, progress. Hale met his eyes. I believe that someone has to make the difficult decisions. Someone has to get their hands dirty so others can stay clean. I built this town from nothing. I created jobs, infrastructure, opportunity. Yes, I've broken laws. Yes, I've hurt people. But more people have prospered under my leadership than would have otherwise. That's the calculus that matters. You're insane. No, I'm practical. There's a difference. Hale checked his pocket watch. You have 4 hours until dawn. I suggest you use them wisely. Ethan turned and walked toward the door. His mind raced, searching for options that didn't exist. Hale was right about everything. The evidence was worthless without someone willing to act on it. Killing Hale solved nothing if the system remained corrupt. And going to war alone against 40 hired guns was suicide. He was halfway down the stairs when he heard footsteps behind him. Cross. Ethan turned. Hale stood at the top of the staircase, silhouetted against the electric light. One more thing, Hale said. Sarah Marlowe. She's smart, brave, everything her father was. But she's also young and angry and doesn't understand how the world really works. If you care about her at all, convince her to stop. Convince her to burn that journal and forget about justice. Because if she keeps pushing, I'll have no choice but to eliminate the threat. She's not a threat. She's a woman documenting crimes. She's a witness who can testify. That makes her a threat. Hale's voice hardened. I like Sarah. I respected Thomas. But sentiment doesn't change mathematics. You want to save someone? Save her. Convince her to let this go. Ethan left without answering. The night air hit him like a slap, cold and sharp. He'd broken into Hale's mansion expecting confrontation, violence, maybe death. Instead, he'd gotten a lecture on realpolitik and a demonstration of just how powerless he really was. The streets of Silver Creek were empty, everyone asleep or pretending to be, hiding from the darkness that ruled this place. Ethan walked aimlessly, his thoughts churning. Every plan he'd made, every strategy he'd considered, all of it assumed he could force change through violence or exposure. But Hale had shown him the flaw. You couldn't force change in a system designed to resist it. You couldn't expose corruption when everyone with power was already complicit. He found himself at the old sheriff's office without meaning to. The building stood dark and abandoned, a monument to failed idealism. Ethan tried the door, locked, but the lock was old and rusted. One hard kick and it gave way. Inside, dust covered everything. The desk where Marlowe had sat. The cells where they'd held drunks and brawlers. The gun rack, empty now, its weapons long since looted or sold. On the wall, barely visible in the moonlight, hung a framed photograph. Ethan struck a match and held it close. Thomas Marlowe stared back at him, young, confident, wearing his sheriff's star like he actually believed it meant something. Beside him stood a much younger Ethan Cross, barely 23, grinning like an idiot who thought justice and truth could actually win. Both of them dead now. One, literally, one in every way that mattered. The match burned down to Ethan's fingers. He dropped it and lit another. On the desk, under a layer of dust, he found Marlowe's old journal. The sheriff had kept meticulous notes, every arrest, every dispute settled, every decision made. Ethan flipped through pages, reading entries written in Marlowe's neat handwriting. Broke up a fight at the Red Canyon. Jimmy Torres and Mike Stevens arguing over a card game. Cooled them both down with a night in the cells and a talking to about respecting your neighbors. Mrs. Chen reported theft of 3 chickens. Turned out her own son had sold them for whiskey money. Gave the boy a choice, make restitution or face charges. He chose to make it right. Victor Hale requested I remove squatters from land he claims to own. Checked the deeds. His claim is questionable at best. Told him to settle it in court like everyone else. He didn't appreciate that. Page after page of small victories. Tiny moments where Marlowe had chosen justice over expedience, had stood up for the powerless against the powerful. Ethan remembered now. That was what had drawn him to the job. Not the gun or the badge, but the idea that you could actually make things better. That standing up mattered. The last entry was dated 3 days before Marlowe's murder. Hale is planning something. Can feel it. His men are moving differently, talking in whispers. Deputy Cross noticed it too. We're being careful, watching our backs, but I won't be intimidated. This town needs law, real law, not whatever Hale decides is convenient. If standing for that gets me killed, so be it. Some things are worth dying for. Ethan closed the journal carefully. His hands were shaking. Marlowe had known death was coming and faced it anyway. Had died for a principle that Ethan was now ready to abandon. Footsteps outside. Ethan's hand went to his Colt. Sarah Marlowe appeared in the doorway, holding a lantern. She wore a coat over her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. I saw the broken door, she said. Figured it was either you or vandals. How'd you know I'd be here? Because it's where I come when I can't sleep. When I need to remember why any of this matters. She stepped inside, her lantern casting dancing shadows. Did you get into Hale's mansion? Yeah. And he was waiting for me, knew I was coming, knew everything. Ethan gestured helplessly. He gave me the evidence I wanted, just handed it over, because he knows it doesn't matter. He owns the system top to bottom. Sarah set her lantern on the desk. So you're giving up? I'm being realistic. That's what my mother said. After they killed my father, she said we had to be realistic. Had to accept that some fights can't be won. Had to move on with our lives and forget about justice. Sarah's voice was steady, but her eyes blazed. I was 14 years old and I listened to her. Packed up everything I owned and ran to San Francisco. Spent years trying to forget. To be realistic. Maybe she was right. She was terrified. There's a difference. Sarah picked up her father's journal, the one Ethan had been reading. He knew they were going to kill him. You saw the last entry. He knew and he stayed anyway. You think that was because he was stupid? Because he didn't understand the odds? I think he was brave and it got him murdered. He was brave and it meant something. Every person in this town over 40 remembers Thomas Marlowe. Remembers that he stood up. Remembers that someone actually tried to fight back. Sarah's hands tightened on the journal. You know what they don't remember? All the people who played it safe, who kept their heads down and survived by becoming accomplices to everything Hale did. Those people are alive and forgotten. My father's dead and remembered. Remembering doesn't bring him back. No. But it keeps the idea alive. The idea that someone might stand up, might fight back, might refuse to accept that power equals right. She set the journal down and moved closer to Ethan. You came back here for revenge. I get that. But revenge is just killing Hale and riding away. What about the people you'd leave behind? What about Luis Cordero and Margaret Pritchard and Henry Dawson and all the others who dared to hope you might actually change something? I can't change anything. Hale proved that tonight. The system's too big, too entrenched. Then change the system. With what? I'm one man. My father was one man, you're one man, I'm one woman, Luis is one accountant, Margaret is one grieving mother. Sarah's eyes locked on his. Add us up and suddenly we're not so alone. But it requires actually leading instead of just shooting. It requires building something instead of just tearing down. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the reasons why she was wrong, why collective action would fail just like everything else. But he couldn't find the words. Because she was right, and he knew it. Hale had won by isolating people, by making everyone believe they were alone against an overwhelming force, by turning Silver Creek into a collection of individuals too scared to become a community. What are you suggesting? Ethan asked. I'm suggesting you stop trying to be the lone gunslinger who saves the day. That's a fantasy. The reality is messier. Sarah pulled out her journal. I've got names here. 43 people who've been wronged by Hale. People who've lost land, money, family. People who hate him but don't know how to fight him. What if we brought them together? What if instead of you against 40 hired guns, it was 50 townspeople against 40 mercenaries? They won't fight. They're too scared. They're isolated. There's a difference. Fear is powerful when you're alone. Less powerful when you realize you're not. She started pacing, her mind clearly racing. Luis has the financial evidence. I have the witness statements. You have the reputation. People remember Deputy Cross, remember that he actually tried. Henry Dawson and his generation remember when Silver Creek was different. Put it all together, and we have the foundation for actual resistance. Hale will kill anyone who stands against him. He'll try. But 40 men can't kill 50 people all at once, especially if those 50 people are armed and organized and fighting for their homes. Sarah stopped pacing. You know what Hale's greatest strength is? It's not his money or his guns. It's that everyone believes he's invincible. Break that belief and his whole empire cracks. Ethan saw the logic, saw the possibility, but he also saw the cost. People will die. People are already dying, slowly, quietly, in ways that don't make headlines. Luis's wife, Margaret's son. How many others we don't even know about? Sarah's voice softened. I'm not saying this will be clean or easy. I'm saying it's necessary. And I'm saying you don't have to do it alone. The lantern flickered. Outside, Silver Creek lay silent under a canopy of stars. Ethan thought about Hale's offer, the wagon waiting at the south edge of town. 5,000 in gold and a chance to walk away from all of this. He thought about Thomas Marlowe dying in an alley, believing his death might matter. He thought about the 23 names in Sarah's journal, the uncounted others who'd suffered in silence. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. All right, he said finally, we do it your way. But we do it smart. No martyrs. No grand gestures that get people killed for nothing. We organize, we plan, and we only move when we're ready. Sarah's smile was fierce and bright. When do we start? Now, before I change my mind. They spent the rest of the night in that abandoned office, planning revolution by lantern light. Sarah knew which people might actually fight back if given the chance. Ethan knew tactics, how to organize resistance, where Hale's defenses were weakest. Together, they sketched out a strategy that was probably crazy, but might actually work. By the time dawn broke, they had a list. 43 names, people who'd been hurt badly enough to risk everything for a chance at justice. The next step was approaching them, carefully, individually, making sure Hale's spies didn't catch wind before they were ready. I'll start with the miners, Sarah said. 3 of them lost fingers in an accident Hale covered up to avoid safety inspections. They hate him, really hate him. I'll talk to the shopkeepers, the ones Hale's been bleeding dry with his monopoly pricing. Ethan checked his weapons from habit. We meet back here tomorrow night, compare notes, see who's actually willing to fight. And if Hale figures out what we're doing, then we move faster. Ethan picked up Marlowe's journal. Your father wrote that some things are worth dying for. He was right. But I'd rather find things worth living for, worth fighting for in a way that actually works. Sarah nodded. My father was brave, but he was also alone. Let's not make that mistake. They left separately. Sarah heading toward the mining district, Ethan toward Main Street. The town was waking up, shopkeepers opening doors, workers trudging to jobs they hated, children playing in streets that should have been safer. Ethan's first stop was the general store. The new owners were a couple in their 50s, weathered and tired. He bought tobacco he didn't smoke and made small talk, mentioned casually that he'd heard about their rent troubles, the way Hale kept raising prices while their income stayed flat. The husband, his name was Robert, just shrugged. That's how it is. Does it have to be? Robert's eyes sharpened. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that 43 people who've been wronged by Victor Hale might have more power together than apart. I'm suggesting that fear only works when you're isolated. Ethan lowered his voice. I'm suggesting that change is possible if enough people demand it. You're going to get yourself killed talking like that. Probably, but I'm going to die eventually anyway. Might as well die for something that matters. Robert was quiet for a long moment. His wife, Emma, had stopped pretending to organize shelves and was listening openly. What would we have to do? Robert asked finally. For now, just listen. Attend a meeting. Hear what we're planning. Ethan pulled out a piece of paper with a time and location. The old church, midnight tomorrow. Come if you want. Don't if you're too scared. No judgment either way. He left before they could respond. Repeated the same conversation at the blacksmith's forge, at the boarding house, at the cobbler's shop. Some people shut down immediately. Some threw him out. But a few, just a few, looked at that piece of paper like it was a lifeline they'd been praying for. By noon, Ethan had talked to 15 people. 5 seemed genuinely interested. 3 were maybes. 7 had refused outright. Not great odds, but it was a start. He was heading back to the hotel when he spotted Marcus Graves. The enforcer's head was bandaged from where Ethan had pistol-whipped him. He stood outside the Red Canyon saloon with 2 other men, all 3 armed and watching the street. Marcus saw Ethan. Their eyes met. Neither man moved. Then Marcus smiled, cold and mean. He made a gun with his finger, aimed it at Ethan, and mimed pulling the trigger. The message was clear. Hale's patience was running out. Ethan kept walking, showed no fear, but his mind was racing. They needed more time, more people, more preparation. But time was a luxury he might not have. Back at the hotel, he found a note slid under his door. Luis Cordero is missing. His office was ransacked last night. No one's seen him since sunset. S. Ethan crushed the note in his fist. Hale was moving faster than expected, eliminating loose ends, which meant Sarah was next. Or Margaret. Or anyone else who'd shown sympathy to Ethan's cause. He had to accelerate the timeline, had to turn whispered conversations into actual action before Hale picked them all off one by one. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He cleaned weapons, checked ammunition, and thought about Thomas Marlowe's last journal entry. Some things are worth dying for. But as Sarah said, some things were worth living for, worth fighting for in a way that actually changed things. The question was whether he could pull it off before Hale's deadline hit, and the killing started in earnest. Midnight came. Ethan made his way to the old church through back alleys and shadows. He arrived early and waited in the darkness, watching to see who'd show up, if anyone showed up. Sarah arrived first, her face pale but determined. Then Henry Dawson, moving slowly but steadily. Margaret Pritchard, Robert and Emma from the general store, a young miner named Jack who'd lost 2 fingers, a widow named Rose whose husband had died in a mine collapse. One by one they filtered in. Not 43. Not even close. But 13 people showed up that first night. 13 people angry enough and brave enough to at least listen. Ethan stood before them in that dusty church and felt the weight of their hope, their desperation, their last chance at something resembling justice. I'm not going to lie to you, he began. What we're planning is dangerous. Some of us might die. Most of us will probably get hurt. And there's a good chance we fail and make everything worse. Someone in the back, Jack, the miner, laughed nervously. Great sales pitch. I'm not selling anything. I'm telling you the truth because you deserve it. Ethan looked at each face in turn. Victor Hale owns this town. He owns the law, the land, the jobs. He's got 40 men with guns who'll do whatever he says. Fighting him head on is suicide. Then why are we here? Margaret asked. Because we're not fighting him head on. We're fighting smart. We're exposing his crimes, organizing resistance, building something he can't just shoot or buy off. Ethan pulled out Sarah's journal and Luis's papers. We have evidence of embezzlement, murder, theft. We have witness statements. We have financial records. What we need is a way to make people care, make them act. Who's going to act? Robert shook his head. The governor's bought. The judges too. You said it yourself, the system's corrupted. Then we go around the system. We bring in federal marshals, or journalists from San Francisco, or we make enough noise that Washington has to pay attention. Sarah stepped forward. My father tried to fix things from inside the system. It got him killed. But there are other ways, other pressures we can apply. Like what? Rose asked. Like shutting down the mine, even for a day. Sarah's eyes glinted. Hale's business partners in Denver and San Francisco expect steady production. Any interruption costs them money. They start asking questions, demanding answers, putting pressure on Hale from directions he can't control. Jack leaned forward. You want us to strike? I'm saying it's an option, not the only one, but an option. Sarah looked at Ethan. What else? We arm ourselves. Train. Make it clear that attacking any one of us means fighting all of us. Ethan knew this was the hard part. I'm not talking about starting a war. I'm talking about making war too costly for Hale to stomach. Right now he thinks he can crush opposition easily. We need to make him think twice. Henry Dawson spoke up, his old voice carrying in the quiet church. In my day, we had pauses. Citizens who'd band together when the law failed. We'd deputize ourselves, go after outlaws the real law wouldn't touch. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't always right, but sometimes it was necessary. Vigilante justice, Margaret said slowly. That's what you're suggesting. No, Ethan said firmly. I'm suggesting organized self-defense and legal resistance. We only use violence if Hale forces it. Otherwise, we focus on exposure, disruption, making his operation unprofitable. But we do it together. We watch each other's backs. We don't let him isolate us like he did with Thomas Marlowe or Luis Cordero. The group fell silent. Ethan could see them wrestling with it. Fear versus anger, safety versus justice, the comfortable lie versus the dangerous truth. Finally, Robert stood. I'm in. Whatever you need. Emma and I have been planning to leave anyway. Figure if we're going down, might as well go down swinging. Emma nodded her agreement. We're in. One by one, the others voiced support. Not all of them. 2 people left quietly, too scared to commit, but 11 stayed. 11 people willing to risk everything for a chance at change. It wasn't an army, but it was a start. They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, planning their first move. They'd start by spreading Luis's financial evidence, printing copies, distributing them throughout town and to newspapers in Carson City. If Hale tried to suppress it, that would only prove its truth. If he didn't, the exposure might force official investigation. Simultaneously, they'd organize the miners. Not an immediate strike, but the threat of one. Leverage. Something to make Hale negotiate instead of just killing. And through it all, they'd protect each other. No one walked alone anymore. Everyone traveled in groups. If Hale wanted to make someone disappear, he'd have to do it in front of witnesses who'd actually talk. As the meeting broke up, Sarah pulled Ethan aside. Luis is dead, isn't he? She asked quietly. Probably. And we're next if we're not careful. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment. You think this can actually work? Honestly? I don't know. But it's the best shot we've got. Ethan met her eyes. Your father tried alone and failed. We try together. Maybe we fail smaller, or maybe we actually succeed. Those aren't great odds. No, but they're better than yesterday's odds. And tomorrow's will be better still if we're smart about this. Sarah smiled sadly. My father used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. Your father was a wise man. He was a dead man. Let's try not to follow his example quite so closely. They left the church separately, melting into Silver Creek's darkness. Above them, stars wheeled through an indifferent sky. Somewhere Victor Hale slept peacefully, confident in his power. Somewhere his hired guns patrolled, enforcing silence through fear. But something had shifted. 13 people had met in secret and committed to resistance. 13 people who would become 14, 15, 20, who would spread the word that opposition was possible, that Victor Hale's empire had cracks, and cracks, given time and pressure, became canyons. Ethan made it back to his hotel room as dawn threatened the eastern horizon. He collapsed into bed fully clothed, exhausted but oddly hopeful. They had a plan. They had people. They had evidence and organization and the beginning of something that might actually work. He slept for 3 hours and woke to pounding on his door. "Cross, open up!" Sheriff Wade's voice urgent and angry. Ethan grabbed his Colt and opened the door carefully. Wade stood there flanked by 2 deputies, all armed. "You need to come with me, now." "On what charge?" "Murder. Luis Cordero's body was found an hour ago in the river. Multiple witnesses saw you arguing with him 2 nights back." Wade's face was grim. "Victor Hale's pressing charges. Says you killed Luis to cover up a robbery." Ethan's mind raced. A setup, an obvious setup, but one that would get him locked up or killed before he could organize real resistance. "I didn't kill Luis." "Tell it to the judge. If you make it that far." Wade gestured. "Gun, slowly." Ethan had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Fight his way out and become a fugitive, or surrender and trust that his allies could spring him before Hale arranged an accident. Neither option was good. He handed over the Colt. The jail cell smelled like rust and despair. Ethan sat on the thin cot, his back against cold stone, watching dust motes drift through the single-barred window. Wade had locked him in without another word, leaving just 1 deputy posted outside, a kid barely 20 who kept glancing nervously toward the door like he expected trouble. Smart kid. Ethan counted the hours by the angle of sunlight creeping across the floor. Noon passed, then afternoon. No food, no water. Just silence and the distant sounds of Silver Creek going about its business, pretending everything was normal. Around 3 o'clock, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Multiple sets. The deputy outside straightened, his hand moving to his gun. Victor Hale entered first, dressed impeccably as always. Behind him came 2 of his men. Not the Graves brothers, but professional types with cold eyes and careful movements. Sheriff Wade trailed behind, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Leave us," Hale said to Wade. "Mr. Hale, I don't think I said leave us." Hale's voice remained pleasant, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. Wade retreated. The heavy door at the end of the corridor clanged shut. Hale studied Ethan through the bars. "Comfortable?" "I've had worse accommodations." "I imagine you have." Hale pulled out a cigar, took his time lighting it. "Luis Cordero's death was unfortunate. He was a good employee, thorough, reliable, until you corrupted him." "I didn't kill him." "Of course you didn't. I did." Hale said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Had him taken to the river, shot twice in the chest, dumped where he'd be found. Messy, but these things happen when amateurs get involved in matters beyond their understanding." Ethan's hands clenched. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because nobody else will hear it. Because I want you to understand exactly how this ends." Hale blew smoke toward the ceiling. "You came back to Silver Creek thinking you could change things, thinking one man with a grudge could topple an empire. I admire the optimism, really, but now you're sitting in a cell, framed for murder, with maybe 12 hours before an unfortunate accident claims your life, just like it claimed Thomas Marlowe's, just like it claimed Luis's. Sarah Marlowe knows the truth, Henry Dawson, Margaret Pritchard, all the people I talked to. Yes, your little resistance movement. Very inspiring." Hale's smile was indulgent. "I know about the meeting last night, the 13 brave souls who showed up to plot revolution. I know what they said, what they planned. I know everything, Cross. This is my town. My eyes are everywhere." The words hit like a punch. One of the 13 was a spy, or someone had talked. Either way, Hale knew. "So you'll kill them too," Ethan said flatly. 13 more bodies to add to your count." "Kill them? Why would I do that?" "They're scared shopkeepers and broken miners. Let them have their little meetings, their brave plans. They won't do anything. They never do." Hale moved closer to the bars. "Fear has a half-life, Cross. Right now they're angry enough to attend midnight meetings. But give it a week, a month. Let them see you dead. Let them remember what happens to people who fight back. That anger turns to ash. They'll go home, lock their doors, and convince themselves that survival is the same as living. You don't know that. I absolutely know that. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Someone gets brave, gathers supporters, makes speeches about justice and standing together. Then that someone dies and suddenly everyone remembers they have families to protect, bills to pay, lives to live. Hale's eyes were empty. You're not special. This uprising isn't special. It'll die with you, probably before your body's even cold. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell Hale he was wrong. But doubt crept in. What if Hale was right? What if the 13 people from last night scattered the moment things got difficult? What if his death accomplished nothing except proving that resistance was futile? The wagon is still at the south edge of town, Hale said quietly. I could have Wade unlock this cell right now. You could ride out, take the gold, disappear. No one would blame you. You tried. You failed. That's how most stories end. And Luis Cordero's murder? Ruled a suicide or a robbery gone wrong. Does it really matter? The man is dead regardless of what the paperwork says. Hale gestured around the cell. This is your last chance, Cross. The absolute last time I make this offer. Take it, or I have you killed tonight. Your choice. Ethan stood slowly. His body ached from the thin cot, from days of tension and poor sleep. He walked to the bars separating him from Hale and looked the mining baron in the eyes. You killed Thomas Marlowe because he wouldn't compromise, wouldn't back down, wouldn't let you turn this town into your personal kingdom. Ethan's voice was steady. You killed Luis Cordero because he dared to want justice for his wife. You've killed dozens of people whose names I don't even know, and you think offering me money will make any of that acceptable? I think offering you your life is remarkably generous, given the circumstances. Then let me be remarkably ungrateful. You can kill me. You can scatter everyone who believes in fighting back. You can maintain your empire for another year, 5 years, maybe even 10. Ethan smiled without humor. But empires built on fear always fall eventually. You know why? Because fear only works if people believe the consequences of resistance are worse than the consequences of submission. And people are starting to realize that dying on their feet beats living on their knees. Hale's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe. Or just annoyance. Philosophical speeches don't stop bullets, Hale said. No. But they plant seeds. Your problem isn't me. It's the idea I represent, that resistance is possible. You can kill me, but you can't kill the idea. It'll spread. Slowly at first, then faster. And one day you'll wake up to find that your 40 hired guns aren't enough because you're facing 100 angry citizens who've decided they're done being afraid. That day will never come. Maybe not. But you're not as sure as you pretend to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here trying to convince me to leave. You'd have just had me shot and been done with it. Ethan leaned closer to the bars. You're scared, Hale. You're scared because for the first time in years, someone's actually fighting back in a way you can't control. And it's eating at you. Hale's jaw tightened. For a moment, Ethan thought he'd actually gotten to him. Then the mining baron's expression smoothed into that familiar mask of cultured indifference. You're wrong, but I appreciate the conviction. Hale turned to leave. You'll be dead by midnight. I'll make sure it's quick. Professional. Unlike what happened to Marlowe, you won't suffer. Consider it my final courtesy. He walked out. His men followed. The door clanged shut, leaving Ethan alone again with the dust and the fading light. Hours crawled past. The sun set. Darkness filled the cell. Ethan sat in shadow, thinking about Thomas Marlowe's last moments. Had he known death was coming? Had he been afraid? Or had he faced it with the same calm certainty he'd shown in life? The belief that standing for something was worth the cost? Footsteps in the corridor, different from before. Quieter. More cautious. Ethan tensed, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. A figure appeared at the bars, silhouetted against the faint lantern light from the front office. Don't make a sound, Sarah Marlowe whispered. She held up a keyring. Wade's passed out drunk at his desk. We've got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices. We? The resistance you think doesn't exist. Sarah unlocked the cell. Come on, we're getting you out of here. Ethan followed her through the dark corridor. In Wade's office, the sheriff was indeed unconscious, a half-empty whiskey bottle on his desk. At the front door, Henry Dawson stood watch, his old hunting rifle cradled in his arms. "Clear outside," Henry said. "For now." They moved quickly through back alleys. Margaret Pritchard waited with horses 3 blocks away. Robert and Emma stood guard, both armed with rifles that looked like they'd been pulled from attics and storage sheds. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded. "Hale knows about the meeting. He's got spies everywhere. You're putting targets on yourselves." "Too late for that," Margaret said grimly. "Word's spreading about Luis Cordero. People are starting to ask questions, starting to realize that anyone who crosses Hale ends up dead or disappeared. You're not the only one who's angry anymore." Sarah handed Ethan his Colt. "We found it in Wade's desk. And these." She pulled out papers. "Luis's financial records, copied and ready for distribution. While Hale was busy locking you up, we were busy organizing. 27 people showed up to our meeting this afternoon. 27. That's double from last night. Because they know what's coming," Robert added. "Hale's not even trying to hide it anymore. Luis dead. You arrested on fake charges. People see the writing on the wall. Either they stand together now or they get picked off one by one later." Ethan looked at the faces surrounding him. Scared faces. Determined faces. People who'd made the same calculation Marlowe had made years ago, that some things were worth the risk. "Where do we go from here?" he asked. "The mine," Jack said, emerging from the shadows with 3 other miners. "We've been talking, the day shift, the night shift. Most of the miners are ready to walk out. We shut down production, Hale loses money. His investors start asking questions. We create pressure from directions he can't just shoot. He'll bring in strikebreakers, new workers. Let him try. Every miner within 50 miles knows what kind of man Hale is. Word spreads. And the new workers? They'll face accidents, equipment failures, mysterious problems that make the mine unprofitable to run." Jack's smile was hard. "We spent years digging wealth out of the ground for him. We know how to make sure nobody else can." "That's sabotage," Ethan said. "That's escalation. People will get hurt." "People are already getting hurt." Sarah's voice was sharp. "Luis is dead. You were going to be killed tonight. How many more bodies before we're allowed to fight back? How bad does it have to get before resistance is justified?" She was right. Ethan knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. "We need a coordinated effort," he said finally. "Not random acts of defiance. A real strategy." He looked at each person in turn. "The mine shuts down tomorrow. Peaceful walkout. No violence unless Hale forces it. While that's happening, we distribute Luis's financial records throughout town. Make sure everyone sees proof of what Hale's been doing. And we send copies to every newspaper in Carson City, to the territorial governor, to anyone who might care." "They're all bought off," Margaret said. "Maybe, but they're also politicians and businessmen. They care about public perception. We make enough noise, create enough scandal, they'll have to respond. Even if it's just for show." Ethan started planning out loud. "We also need protection, guard rotations, make sure no one's alone. Hale's going to strike back and he'll go after the weakest targets first. We need to make sure there are no weak targets." "What about you?" Henry asked. "You're a fugitive now. Wade wakes up and finds you gone. Hale will put a price on your head." "Good. Let him waste resources hunting me instead of hurting civilians." Ethan checked his Colt, fully loaded. "I'll stay mobile. Keep pressure on Hale's operations. Make him react to me instead of plotting his next move." Sarah grabbed his arm. "That's suicide. You can't take on 40 men alone." "I'm not alone anymore, remember?" Ethan squeezed her hand briefly. "You've got the harder job. Keeping people organized, keeping them brave, making sure this movement survives even if I don't." "Such inspiring confidence," she muttered, but her eyes were wet. They separated into groups. The miners headed back to the work camps to spread word of the strike. Robert and Emma returned to their store to start distributing Luis's financial evidence. Margaret and Henry took defensive positions around town, watching for Hale's response. Ethan and Sarah made for the old sheriff's office. It was abandoned, off Hale's radar, and central enough to coordinate from. Inside, Sarah lit a lantern while Ethan checked the gun rack. Empty, as expected. But in the back closet, he found what he was looking for: Marlowe's old weapons cache. 2 rifles, a shotgun, boxes of ammunition. Not much, but better than nothing. "My father kept these for emergencies," Sarah said. "Guess he knew someday things would get bad enough to need them." He was planning for this, for someone to finish what he started. Ethan loaded the rifles. Smart man. Dead man, Sarah corrected. She sat at her father's old desk, spreading out papers and notes. We need to be smarter, fight differently than he did. They spent the next hour refining strategy. The strike would begin at sunrise. By noon, Hale would be facing questions from his investors about why production had stopped. By evening, the evidence of his crimes would be circulating through every saloon, every shop, every home in Silver Creek. Hale would respond with violence. That was inevitable, but if enough people stood firm, if enough witnesses saw what he did, the violence itself would become proof of his desperation. Around 11, footsteps on the boardwalk outside. Both of them went for weapons, but the knock was gentle, familiar. It's Rose, a woman's voice called. Let me in. Sarah opened the door. Rose entered quickly, her face pale. Hale knows. About the strike, about the evidence, all of it. His men are mobilizing. They're planning to hit the mining camps at dawn, arrest the ringleaders before the walkout can start. How do you know this? Ethan asked. My cousin works in Hale's household, kitchen staff. She heard him giving orders to the Graves brothers. Rose wrung her hands. They're planning to make examples, public arrests, public beatings, maybe worse, scare everyone else into submission. Ethan looked at Sarah. We move up the timeline. Strike happens tonight, right now. Get everyone out of the camps before Hale's men arrive. That gives us no time to organize, Sarah protested. It also gives Hale no time to crush us before we start. Ethan grabbed one of the rifles. Rose, can you get word to the camps? I'll try, but it's late. People are asleep. Then wake them up. Tell them if they stay in those camps, they'll be arrested or beaten or killed. Tell them their choice is simple. Walk out now while they still can, or wait for Hale to make the choice for them. Rose nodded and fled into the night. Sarah was already moving, gathering papers and weapons. This is chaos. We're not ready. We're never ready. Nobody's ever ready for this. Ethan checked his ammunition. But ready or not, the moment's here. Hale forced our hand. Or we forced his. Hard to tell anymore. She met his eyes. If this goes wrong, it's already wrong. Has been since the day Thomas Marlowe died and nobody spoke up. We're just trying to make it less wrong. Ethan moved to the door. Get to the church. Ring the bell. That was always the signal for emergencies, right? Ring it and people will come. Then you tell them what's happening. Give them the choice. What will you be doing? Buying time, making noise, convincing Hale I'm the threat he should focus on. Ethan smiled without humor. I'm good at being a distraction. He left before Sarah could argue. The streets were dark and mostly empty. A few drunks stumbled home from saloons. A dog barked somewhere. Normal night in Silver Creek. The last normal night for a while. Ethan made his way toward the refinery. If he could disable it, even temporarily, it would cost Hale money and attention. Create chaos that the strike could exploit. The industrial complex loomed against the stars. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but they were focused outward. Ethan circled around, found a section of fence in shadow, and climbed. Inside, machinery sat silent. The night shift was minimal, just maintenance crews and security. Ethan moved between buildings, looking for maximum impact with minimum risk. Fire was tempting, but too dangerous. Explosion even more so. But machinery could be sabotaged. Valves could be opened or closed. Control systems could be damaged in ways that would take days to repair. He was tampering with a pressure valve when voices nearby froze him in place. Said the whole crew's walking out tomorrow. Every last one. Hale's gonna lose his mind. The investors are already asking questions about production numbers. 2 guards, making rounds. Ethan pressed himself against machinery, staying still. What do you care? You get paid either way. I care because if this place shuts down, we're all out of work. Hale can't pay us if he's got no income. Stupid miners don't realize they're cutting their own throats. The voices faded. Ethan resumed work, his hands moving quickly. He damaged 3 critical valve assemblies and disabled a pump control before retreating the way he'd come. Outside, church bells started ringing. Not the gentle call to worship, but an urgent, insistent clanging that echoed across Silver Creek. The emergency signal. People would be waking up, confused and frightened, wondering what was happening. Ethan ran. He reached the church as townspeople began arriving. Sarah stood on the steps, her face illuminated by lantern light, addressing a growing crowd. No more time for waiting. Hale's sending his men to the mining camps at dawn. Anyone there will be arrested, beaten, killed if they resist. Her voice carried across the square. So we're not waiting for dawn. We're acting now. The miners are walking out tonight, leaving the camps, coming here, and we need to be ready to protect them. Protect them how? Someone shouted. We got no guns, no training. We've got numbers, we've got the truth, and we've got each other. Sarah held up Luis's financial records. These papers prove Victor Hale is a thief and a murderer. They prove everything we've suspected for years. I'm sending copies to every newspaper in the territory, to the governor, to anyone who'll listen, and I'm betting that once this information is public, Hale's powerful friends will abandon him to save themselves. That's betting our lives on politicians growing a spine, Henry Dawson called out. Not great odds. You're right, it's not. But what's the alternative? We keep living in fear? Keep watching our friends and family get hurt while we do nothing? Sarah's eyes blazed. Luis Cordero is dead. Thomas Marlowe is dead. James Pritchard is dead. How many more names do we add to that list before we say enough? The crowd murmured. Ethan could see them wrestling with it. Fear versus anger. Safety versus justice. The same choice everyone faced eventually. I'm with her, Margaret Pritchard said, stepping forward. My son died because nobody stood up. I won't let that happen again. Me too, Robert added. Emma beside him nodded agreement. One by one, people committed. Not everyone. Maybe half the crowd slipped away into the darkness, too scared or too practical to risk everything. But the other half stayed. 40, 50, 60 people. More than Ethan had dared hope. Sarah organized them quickly. Guard posts around the church and key locations. Runners to spread word. Groups to escort miners from the camps to safety. She was a natural leader, Ethan realized. Better at this than he was. Her father's daughter in all the ways that mattered. Around 2 a.m, the miners started arriving. Not all of them. Maybe half the workforce. Dirty, tired, carrying what few possessions they owned. Jack led the first group, his face grim. Hale's men hit Camp 3 about an hour ago, he reported. Arrested 15 people. Beat them pretty badly from what we heard. We got everyone else out before they reached the other camps, but it was close. Where are the arrested miners? Ethan asked. Jail, probably. Or Hale's holding them somewhere as leverage. This was the moment. The point where talking became action. Where carefully laid plans met messy reality. We get them back, Ethan said. Sarah stared at him. That's insane. Wade's got deputies. Hale's got his men. You're talking about raiding the jail. I'm talking about not leaving our people in enemy hands. Ethan looked at the assembled crowd. 15 miners got arrested for refusing to be slaves. We let that stand and everyone else learns the lesson. Resistance gets you beaten and imprisoned. We break them out and everyone learns a different lesson. We protect our own. They'll kill us, someone said. Maybe. Or maybe they're as scared as we are and they're waiting to see who blinks first. Ethan checked his weapons. I need 10 people. Volunteers only. We go in quiet, get the prisoners out, minimize bloodshed if possible. And if it's not possible, Jack asked, then we do what's necessary and live with the consequences. 12 people stepped forward, more than he needed. Ethan selected the ones who looked like they could handle themselves in a fight. Jack and 5 other miners, Robert, 2 younger men whose names he didn't know, and Sarah. Absolutely not, Ethan told her. Absolutely yes. You need someone who knows the jail layout, someone who's been in there visiting my father's old office. She shouldered a rifle. Besides, you need me. I'm a better shot than half these people. She wasn't wrong. Ethan nodded reluctantly. They moved through Silver Creek's empty streets like ghosts. The jail sat dark and quiet. 2 deputies on duty, the young kid from earlier and an older man Ethan didn't recognize. We go through the back, Ethan whispered. Quick and quiet. Disarm them, lock them up, get the prisoners out. No killing unless there's no other choice. They split up. Ethan and Jack took the front while Sarah led 4 others around back. Ethan counted to 30, then kicked in the front door. The young deputy jumped up, reaching for his gun. Ethan was faster. He slammed the kid against the wall and disarmed him in 2 moves. Don't, Ethan warned. Just don't. In the back, sounds of struggle. Then Sarah's voice. Clear. The older deputy was already unconscious, courtesy of a blow from Robert's rifle butt. They locked both deputies in an empty cell and grabbed the keys. The arrested miners were in the holding cells, bruised, some bleeding, but alive. They stumbled out, shocked and grateful. "Can you walk?" Ethan asked them. "We can run," one said through split lips. They fled the jail with their rescued people. Behind them, Silver Creek remained eerily quiet. No alarms, no pursuit. Either Hale didn't know yet or he was planning something bigger. Back at the church, the crowd had swelled to maybe 80 people. Families of the arrested miners, shopkeepers who'd closed up and come to help. People Ethan had never seen before, drawn by the bells and the rumors. A movement was forming, ragged and desperate and probably doomed, but real, happening right in front of him. Sarah climbed the church steps again. "We've freed the prisoners. We've shut down the mine. We've exposed Hale's crimes. Now comes the hard part, holding our ground. He's going to come for us with everything he has, so we need to be ready." "Ready how?" someone shouted. "By being willing to stand together. By making it clear that attacking any one of us means fighting all of us. By showing Victor Hale that Silver Creek isn't his kingdom anymore. It belongs to the people who actually live here and work here and die here." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Ethan pulled Sarah aside. "Hale's got 40 professional guns. We've got 80 civilians, most of whom have never been in a real fight. The math doesn't favor us." "The math never favors resistance. That's what makes it brave." Sarah's jaw was set. "We've come this far. We can't back down now." "I'm not suggesting we back down. I'm suggesting we be smart about this. Hale wants a battle because he knows he'll win. We need to give him something else, something he's not prepared for." "Like what?" Ethan thought about his conversation with Hale, about the mining baron's confidence, his certainty that fear would always win, his belief that people would always choose safety over justice when pushed. "We give him a choice," Ethan said slowly. "Public, witnessed. We force him to either negotiate like a civilized human being or reveal himself as the tyrant he really is. Either way, he loses. He'll never negotiate. Probably not. But making the offer isn't about him. It's about everyone watching. It's about showing that we're the reasonable ones, that we tried peace and he chose violence." Ethan looked at the assembled crowd, scared people trying to be brave, ordinary people attempting extraordinary things. "Your father taught me that justice isn't just about being right. It's about being seen to be right. We need witnesses. We need to make this public enough that Hale can't just crush us quietly and rewrite history." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Dawn. We send him a formal message, invite him to meet. Public square. Neutral ground. We present our terms. If he refuses or attacks, everyone sees who's really the lawless one. And if he accepts, then we find out if a man like Victor Hale can actually be reasoned with. My money's on no, but we have to try." They spent the remaining hours before dawn preparing, weapons distributed, guard rotations established. Children and elderly moved to the church's interior, away from windows and doors. Messages sent to every corner of Silver Creek, inviting people to witness what was about to happen. The town waited for sunrise, for Victor Hale's response, for whatever came next. Ethan stood on the church steps as the eastern sky began to lighten, watching Silver Creek wake up to revolution. He thought about Thomas Marlowe's journal, about standing for things bigger than yourself, about how sometimes the only way to win was to make the other side reveal what they really were. The dawn came red and angry, painting everything in shades of blood and promise. And in his mansion on the hill, Victor Hale received word that his empire had finally met something it couldn't buy, threaten, or kill into submission. The messenger arrived at Hale's mansion just as the sun crested the horizon. A young miner named Thomas, no relation to Marlowe, though the coincidence wasn't lost on anyone, carried Sarah's written invitation in a sealed envelope. He returned 20 minutes later, his face pale. "He laughed," Thomas reported. "Said to tell you he'll be there at noon. Said he's looking forward to watching amateurs play at Revolution." Ethan nodded. He'd expected nothing less. Hale's arrogance was a weapon they could use if they were careful. The morning passed in preparation. Word spread fast. By 10 o'clock, nearly 200 people had gathered in the town square, not all of them supporters. Some came out of curiosity, others hoping to witness Hale crush this rebellion so they could return to the safety of obedience. But they came. That was what mattered. Witnesses. Sarah organized the crowd with military precision, armed defenders in a loose perimeter, families in the center, the freed miners visible and vocal, their bruised faces testament to Hale's methods. She'd even convinced 3 shopkeepers to set up tables with Luis's financial documents, free for anyone to examine. "We make this about transparency," she explained to Ethan. "Everything in the open, everything documented. Hale thrives in shadows. We drag him into daylight." At 11:30, riders appeared on the road from the mansion. 40 men, maybe more. They came in formation, professional and intimidating. The Graves brothers led the column, Marcus with his bandaged head, Jacob with his hand still wrapped. Behind them rode Victor Hale in an expensive carriage, looking like a king touring his domain. The crowd tensed. Hands moved to weapons. Mothers pulled children closer. "Hold," Ethan called out. "Nobody moves unless I give the word. This is about showing we're better than him, that we can be civilized even when he can't." Hale's entourage stopped at the edge of the square. The mining baron stepped down from his carriage, adjusting his suit like he was attending a social function. His men fanned out, hands on weapons but not drawing. Yet. Ethan walked forward to meet him. Sarah matched his stride. Behind them, Henry Dawson and Margaret Pritchard followed, representing Silver Creek's older generation. A delegation, not a mob. Hale smiled pleasantly. "Deputy Cross. Miss Marlowe. I must say I'm impressed. When I received your invitation, I half expected to find the square empty. People coming to their senses and scurrying back to their homes. But here you all are." "Here we are," Ethan agreed. "Seems you underestimated how tired people are of living in fear." "Fear? Such a harsh word. I prefer order, security. The peace that comes from knowing someone capable is in charge." Hale gestured around the square. "Look at them, shopkeepers and miners, mothers and children. Do they look like revolutionaries to you? They look like frightened people playing dress-up with other people's courage." "They look like citizens standing up for their town," Sarah said sharply. "Which is more than you've ever been. You're a parasite who's been bleeding Silver Creek dry for years." Hale's smile never wavered. "Strong words from Thomas Marlowe's daughter. I knew your father, respected him even. He had principles, admirable, if impractical. I assume you've inherited his stubbornness along with his idealism?" "I inherited his journal, his badge, his belief that some things are worth fighting for." Sarah pulled out the leather journal. "And I inherited all the evidence he gathered before you had him murdered. Every bribe, every theft, every crime you thought was buried with him." "Interesting. And what do you plan to do with this evidence?" "We already did it." Sarah gestured to the tables. "Copies distributed throughout town. More sent to Carson City, to newspapers in San Francisco, to the territorial governor's office. Your crimes are public now. The whole territory will know what kind of man you really are." Hale examined his fingernails, utterly unconcerned. "The territorial governor owes me money. The newspapers won't print unsubstantiated accusations without corroboration. And even if they did, what do you think happens? I hire lawyers, I dispute the claims, I drag everything out in court for years while you bankrupt yourselves trying to fight me." "We have witnesses," Margaret spoke up. "Dozens of people willing to testify about what you've done. Witnesses can be discredited, intimidated, made to disappear." Hale looked at her with something like pity. "Mrs. Pritchard, I was genuinely sorry about your son. James was a good worker, but he made the mistake of threatening my business interests. What did you expect me to do?" The admission hit like a thunderclap. Hale had just confessed to murder in front of 200 witnesses. Ethan saw the shock ripple through the crowd, the horrified realization that the rumors were true, that the monster was real. Margaret's face went white. "You admit it? Just like that? Why not? Who's going to arrest me? Sheriff Wade?" Hale laughed. "He works for me. The judges work for me. The whole system works for me. You people don't seem to grasp what that means. I could shoot someone dead right here in this square and walk away clean. That's what power looks like." "Then you're not here to negotiate," Ethan said. "Of course not. I'm here to watch you surrender. To see the moment when reality breaks through your delusions and you realize this little uprising changes nothing." Hale's eyes hardened. "You have until sunset to disperse. Return to your homes. Return to your jobs. Accept that Silver Creek belongs to me and always will. Those who comply will be allowed to resume their lives. Those who resist will face consequences. And if we refuse, then my men clear this square. By force. With bullets, if necessary. Hale gestured to his armed entourage. You've got 80 people, maybe 100. Half of them can't fight. The other half don't really want to. I've got 40 professional soldiers who do this for a living. The math is simple. Sarah stepped forward. You're wrong about them. These people aren't here because they're brave. They're here because they're desperate. Because living under your boot isn't really living. Because they've decided that dying on their feet beats surviving on their knees. Inspiring speech. Your father made similar ones. Hale's voice dropped. How did that work out for him? The square erupted, angry shouts, people surging forward, the tenuous peace evaporating into rage and grief. Hold! Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone hold! The crowd reluctantly stilled, but the fury was palpable now, raw and desperate. Ethan turned back to Hale. You want to know the difference between you and us? You think power comes from money and guns, from fear and control. But real power comes from people willingly standing together, from choosing community over self-interest. You can kill me. You can kill Sarah. You can kill everyone in this square. But the moment you do, you prove everything we've been saying. You prove you're a tyrant who rules through violence because you've got nothing else. And you prove you're fools who died for nothing. Maybe. Or maybe we prove that some things matter more than survival. That dignity and justice and standing up for what's right are worth the cost. Ethan looked at the crowd. Every person here made a choice. They chose to be here knowing what might happen. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing humans can do. Hale studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Marcus, clear the square. Start with the armed ones. Anyone who resists, shoot them. The Graves brothers moved forward, hands on their guns. The crowd tensed. This was it, the moment where words became blood. Ethan's hand dropped to his Colt. Stop! The shout came from behind Hale's lines. A rider galloped into the square, his horse lathered with sweat. He wore a federal marshal's badge and carried papers in his hand. The marshal reined in beside Hale. Victor Hale? Who's asking? United States Marshal James Porter. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement, fraud, murder, and conspiracy. Porter held up the papers. Evidence was delivered to the federal prosecutor in Carson City yesterday. Ledgers, witness statements, documented proof of crimes spanning 20 years. You're coming with me. Hale's face went blank with shock. That's impossible. I own the prosecutor. You own the territorial prosecutor. This came from federal court. Different jurisdiction, different authority. Porter gestured to the riders behind him. 6 more federal marshals, all armed. You can come peacefully, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. The square held its breath. Hale looked at his men, at the marshals, at the crowd watching his empire collapse in real time. Ethan could see him calculating, searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. On what evidence? Hale demanded. Forged documents? Coerced testimony? On the evidence provided by your own accountant, Luis Cordero, before his death. He mailed copies of your financial records to the federal prosecutor 2 weeks ago. Insurance, he called it, in case something happened to him. Porter's expression was granite. Looks like his caution was justified. Luis, even dying, he'd thought ahead. Had planned for this possibility. Ethan felt a surge of respect for the quiet accountant who'd turned his grief into action. Hale's men looked uncertain now. They'd signed up to intimidate miners and crush local resistance. Fighting federal marshals was a different proposition entirely. Marcus, Hale said quietly, disperse these marshals. I'll triple your pay. Marcus looked at the 7 armed federal agents, at the 200 witnesses, at the evidence scattered across tables for anyone to read. His hand moved away from his gun. Sorry, boss, this is above my pay grade. Federal's federal. He stepped back. His brothers followed. One by one, Hale's hired guns did the same, abandoning him the moment his power evaporated. Porter pulled out iron shackles. Mr. Hale, your wrists. For a moment, Ethan thought Hale might resist, might go for a gun or try to run. But the mining baron was too smart for that. He extended his hands with dignity and tact, even as the shackles clicked shut. This isn't over, Hale said. I have lawyers, resources. This is a temporary setback, nothing more. Maybe, Porter agreed, but you'll be making your arguments from a cell, not a mansion. And these folks? He gestured to the crowd. They've got their town back while you're gone. What happens here is up to them now. The marshals led Hale away. His expensive carriage followed, empty now. His hired guns dispersed, suddenly unemployed and directionless. The empire that had ruled Silver Creek for 20 years collapsed in minutes, toppled not by violence but by evidence and jurisdiction. The square erupted in chaos. Cheering, crying, celebrating, people hugging strangers, children dancing. The sheer relief of tyranny ending was overwhelming. Sarah found Ethan in the crowd. She was crying and laughing simultaneously. Luis did it. That beautiful, brilliant man. He planned for this. Knew Hale would kill him and planned anyway. He gave us the weapon. We just had to be willing to use it. Ethan watched the celebration, feeling strangely disconnected. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd actually won. So why did it feel incomplete? Because Hale was right about one thing. This was just beginning. Over the next weeks, Silver Creek transformed. The mines remained closed while a federal investigation examined working conditions and wage theft. The territorial governor, suddenly very interested in appearing tough on corruption, appointed a new sheriff, someone from outside Hale's influence, someone who actually believed in enforcing laws. Sarah Marlowe took over organizing town meetings, real ones, where people voted on decisions affecting their community. She was good at it, balancing different interests, finding compromise, pushing for justice, while remaining practical. Margaret Pritchard opened a fund for families who'd lost loved ones to Hale's violence. The money came from liquidating some of Hale's seized assets, a small justice for immense wrongs. Henry Dawson started a town council of elders, preserving the history of what happened so future generations would remember, would know that ordinary people had stood up and won. Robert and Emma expanded their store, no longer crushed by Hale's monopolistic pricing. Other businesses followed. The economy began to breathe again. The mines eventually reopened under new ownership, a consortium of investors from San Francisco who agreed to fair wages and safety standards in writing. It wasn't perfect. Some workers still got hurt. Disputes still arose. But there were mechanisms now for addressing grievances that didn't involve violence or intimidation. Ethan stayed through it all, helping where he could. But he felt increasingly like a ghost haunting someone else's victory. This was Silver Creek's story now, Sarah's story, the people who'd chosen to stay and build something better. 6 weeks after Hale's arrest, Ethan sat with Sarah in the old sheriff's office. She'd claimed it as headquarters for the town council, filling it with papers and plans and the messy business of governance. "You're leaving," she said. "Not a question." "Yeah, soon." "Why?" "You helped save this town. People look up to you. You could run for sheriff. Actually, make the job mean something." "That's your father's dream, not mine." Ethan leaned back in the chair that used to be Marlowe's. "I came here for revenge, found something better, justice, community, proof that people can change things. But I'm not a builder, Sarah. I'm a catalyst. I start fires and move on." "That's running away with extra steps." "Maybe. Or maybe it's recognizing what I'm good at." Ethan met her eyes. "You don't need me anymore. You've got capable people, democratic institutions, actual law. You've got everything your father wanted for Silver Creek. My staying would just complicate things." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Where will you go?" "Don't know yet. Somewhere that needs starting fires, probably. There are a lot of Silver Creeks out there, a lot of Victor Hales. Someone's got to remind people that resistance is possible." The lone wanderer bringing justice to the frontier. Very romantic. It's not about romance. It's about recognizing what needs doing and doing it. Ethan stood. "I'm not a hero, Sarah. I'm just a man who got angry enough to fight back and lucky enough to survive. But there are others like me. And others like you. And eventually, maybe we'll run out of towns that need saving." "I doubt it, but it's a nice thought." Sarah stood and hugged him. "Thank you for coming back, for not giving up even when it seemed hopeless, for reminding us we could stand. Thank Luis, thank Margaret and Henry and everyone who chose to show up. I just pointed the direction. They did the walking." Ethan left Silver Creek 3 days later, riding out at dawn on Ash. A few people came to see him off, Sarah, Margaret, Henry, some of the miners. No grand ceremony, no speeches, just quiet goodbyes and promises to write. The town looked different in morning light, cleaner somehow, less oppressed. Children played in streets that used to be dangerous. Shopkeepers opened their doors without fear. It wasn't paradise. Probably never would be. But it was better. That had to count for something. He rode south, toward the desert that had carried him here months ago. The same sun beat down. The same dust rose with each hoofstep. But Ethan felt different, lighter, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying for 8 years. Thomas Marlowe's death had meaning now. Luis Cordero's sacrifice mattered. All the people who'd suffered under Hale's rule had been vindicated, not fully, not perfectly, but enough to prove that standing up wasn't futile. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Ethan followed them through newspapers in whatever town he passed through. Hale's lawyers were good, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness testified, document after document entered the record. The sheer weight of accumulated crimes crushed any defense. Victor Hale was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His assets were seized, liquidated, distributed partially to victims. His name became synonymous with corruption. The territory held him up as an example of what happened when greed went unchecked. It wasn't the death penalty Marlowe might have wanted, but it was justice. Imperfect, slow, bureaucratic justice. The kind that came from institutions and evidence rather than guns and vengeance. Ethan read about the sentencing in a saloon in Tucson 6 months after leaving Silver Creek. He raised his glass to the empty air, toasting ghosts. You were right, Thomas. The law can work. Just takes people willing to stand behind it, willing to bleed for it if necessary. He finished his drink and moved on. There was always another town. Always another tyrant who needed reminding that power had limits. Always another group of scared people who just needed someone to show them they weren't alone. 2 years later, Ethan received a letter forwarded through several post offices. Sarah's handwriting, familiar now from previous correspondence. Silver Creek is thriving. We held elections last month, real ones, with multiple candidates and actual choice. I ran for mayor. Lost to Robert, which is probably for the best. He's got a knack for the boring administrative work I hate. I'm focusing on education now, making sure kids learn the real history of what happened here. Making sure they know that change is possible when people organize and stand together. The Marlowe Memorial Library opened last week. We named it after my father, filled it with books and his journals and documentation of everything that happened. People come from other towns to see it, to learn how we threw off a tyrant. Some of them go home and start their own resistance movements. Turns out, courage is contagious. We miss you. Henry asks about you constantly. Margaret, too. They want to know if you're staying safe, if you're eating enough, if you've found another town that needs saving. I tell them you're fine, that men like you are always fine until suddenly they're not. So be careful, whatever you're doing. And Ethan, thank you. Not just for coming back, but for showing us we had the strength all along. We were just too scared to use it. You didn't save us. You reminded us we could save ourselves. That's the real victory, I think. Not that we beat Hale, but that we learned we could beat him, that we stopped being victims and became citizens. Silver Creek is ours now, ours to build, ours to ruin, ours to make better. That's all anyone can ask for, the chance to determine their own fate. Come visit sometime. The door's always open, and there's a plaque in the town square with your name on it, next to my father's. Those who stood when standing cost everything. You earned that, whether you believe it or not. Your friend Sarah. Ethan folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his saddlebag alongside the others. He was in Colorado now, in a mining town that felt depressingly familiar. Same company store, same debt slavery, same fear. But the miners were talking, whispering about Silver Creek, about what happened when people organized, about the possibility that change wasn't just fantasy. Ethan listened to those whispers and smiled. Sarah was right. Courage was contagious. And the story of Silver Creek was spreading, infecting other towns with the dangerous idea that ordinary people had power if they were willing to claim it. He stayed in Colorado for 3 months, doing what he did best, talking to the angry ones, the desperate ones, the ones ready to risk everything, showing them how to organize, how to gather evidence, how to build coalitions strong enough to face down tyrants. This mining town's Victor Hale was named Jonah Blackwell. Different name, same species. But when the miners finally struck, when they presented their demands backed by evidence and unified action, Blackwell folded, negotiated, improved conditions rather than fight a battle he'd lose. No marshals needed, no arrests, just economic pressure applied intelligently until the cost of oppression exceeded the benefit. Ethan moved on before the celebration ended. That was someone else's victory to savor. His job was finding the next fire that needed starting. Years passed. The frontier slowly civilized, though civilized was probably too generous a word. Laws spread. Federal authority extended. The wild, lawless spaces shrank. Men like Victor Hale found it harder to build private kingdoms, harder to murder with impunity. Not because human nature changed. People were still greedy, still cruel, still willing to exploit the weak. But systems evolved. Witnesses became harder to silence. Evidence became harder to suppress. Organization became easier as telegraph lines spread and newspapers proliferated. The lone gunslinger became obsolete. Communities learned they could protect themselves through law and collective action rather than relying on mysterious strangers. Ethan watched this transformation with mixed feelings. Glad for the progress, sad for his own irrelevance. He was a relic of an era that was ending, a bridge between the violent frontier and the lawful civilization slowly replacing it. He was 42 when he finally returned to Silver Creek. The town had grown substantially. New buildings, paved streets, electric lights. The mine operated under strict safety regulations. A proper school taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and civics. The church's steeple had been straightened and reinforced. Sarah met him at the edge of town. She was 38 now, with threads of gray in her auburn hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She'd married a school teacher, had 2 children, and served 3 terms as mayor before stepping down to let others lead. "You look old," she said bluntly. "Feel old. Turns out getting shot at for 20 years takes a toll." Ethan dismounted. Ash was grayer now too, moving slower but still reliable. "Town looks good. We've had our struggles, economic downturns, political fights, all the normal problems of normal towns." Sarah smiled. "But we handle them ourselves now. Democratic votes and town meetings. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes we make mistakes. But there are mistakes to make." They walked through Silver Creek together. Sarah pointed out changes. The hospital where Margaret Pritchard volunteered, the library bearing Thomas Marlowe's name, the monument in the square listing everyone who'd stood against Hale. Ethan's name was there. So was Luis Cordero's. 23 others who'd died over the years. And 100 more who'd survived and built something better. "People still talk about you," Sarah said. "The stranger who came back from the dead to save us. Some of the stories have gotten pretty exaggerated. They say you single-handedly defeated Hale's entire army, that you're some kind of angel of justice. I'm just a man who got mad and stayed mad long enough to make a difference. That's all any of us are." Sarah led him to the cemetery on the hill. Thomas Marlowe's grave had a proper headstone now, maintained and decorated with flowers. Beside it was a newer marker for Luis Cordero, with an inscription. He fought for truth when lies were easier. He chose justice when silence was safer. Ethan stood before Marlowe's grave for a long time. Finally, he spoke, feeling foolish but needing to say it anyway. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Sorry I ran instead of standing with you. Sorry I wasted 8 years when I could have been fighting." He took a breath. "But I tried to finish what you started. Tried to prove your death meant something. Hope that counts for something." The grave offered no response. The dead rarely did. Sarah touched his arm. "He'd be proud. Not just of what you did, but who you became. You could have stayed angry and vengeful. Instead, you channeled it into helping people organize and stand up for themselves. That's harder than revenge. That's actual change. Didn't feel hard. Felt necessary. The best things usually do." Sarah smiled. "Stay for dinner? My family would love to meet the famous Ethan Cross. My children have heard stories about you their whole lives. Stories are probably better than the reality. Stories always are. But you should know, you're part of Silver Creek's mythology now. Part of what we teach children about standing up and fighting back. Your name's going to outlive you here." Ethan wasn't sure how he felt about that. Being remembered was a kind of immortality, but also a kind of trap. Still, There were worse legacies than teaching children that resistance was possible. He stayed in Silver Creek for 2 weeks, long enough to meet Sarah's family, to visit with Margaret and Henry, to see how completely the town had transformed. It was boring in the best possible way. Municipal meetings about sewer systems, debates over property taxes, arguments about school curriculum, normal town problems, the kind that arose when tyranny was just a memory and people could focus on mundane concerns. On his last night, Ethan sat with Sarah on the porch of her house, watching Silver Creek settle into darkness. Electric lights twinkled like grounded stars. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked. "Keep moving. There are still places that need help. Still people who need reminding they're not powerless." Ethan sipped coffee, savoring the simple pleasure. "But it's different now. Easier. Your story spread. Other towns followed the example. The map of places where tyrants rule unchallenged is shrinking." "Good. That means we're winning. Or it means I'm running out of work. You say that like it's a bad thing." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "You're allowed to rest, allowed to stop fighting and just live." "Maybe someday, when there's nothing left to fight for." "That day will never come. There's always something to fight for. But fighting is a young person's game. At some point, you let the next generation take over." Ethan thought about that. He'd spent 20 years fighting, first as a deputy, then as a fugitive, then as a catalyst for resistance. What did a man like him do when the fighting stopped, when the frontier closed and civilization won? He didn't have an answer. Maybe there wasn't one. The next morning, he saddled Ash and prepared to leave. Half the town came to see him off, which was embarrassing and touching in equal measure. "Where to?" someone called out. "Wherever the road leads, same as always." "Come back soon," Margaret said, pressing a package into his hands. Food for the journey, carefully wrapped. "Visit whenever you want," Sarah added. "You'll always have a home here." Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He mounted Ash and rode out, the town's farewell echoing behind him. He never returned to Silver Creek, not because he didn't want to, but because the road kept leading elsewhere, to other towns, other fights, other people who needed showing they weren't powerless. Each battle was smaller than the last, each victory more modest. The age of empires built by single men was ending. The age of institutions and collective action was beginning. Ethan Cross became a story more than a person. The stranger who'd returned to Silver Creek and toppled a tyrant. The catalyst who showed ordinary people they could create change. Different versions of the tale spread across the frontier, some accurate, most embellished, all serving the same function, reminding people that standing up was possible. He was 53 when he finally stopped riding. His body couldn't take it anymore. Too many old wounds, too many years in the saddle. He settled in a small town in Montana, bought a modest house, and lived quietly, anonymously. Sometimes people recognized him, asked if he was really Ethan Cross. He'd smile and say no, just someone who looked like him. People wanted their legends larger than life. Actual Ethan Cross, aging and tired and ordinary, was disappointing. He was fine with that. Heroes were useful when they inspired, burdensome when they had to live up to impossible expectations. Sarah wrote regularly until the letters stopped coming. Ethan learned later she had died at 62, surrounded by family and friends, having lived long enough to see Silver Creek become the town her father had dreamed of. Her funeral attracted hundreds, people whose lives she'd touched, children she'd taught, causes she'd championed. Henry Dawson made it to 91, still whittling on his bench and telling stories about the old days. Margaret Pritchard died at 76, having used her grief to build something beautiful, a support network for families who'd lost loved ones to violence and injustice. One by one, the people who'd stood in that square died. Natural deaths, mostly. Old age claiming what tyranny couldn't. Their children and grandchildren inherited the town, adding new stories to the old ones, building on foundations laid with courage and blood. Ethan Cross died at 68, quietly in his sleep, in a house 500 miles from Silver Creek. No dramatic last stand, no final showdown with evil, just an old man closing his eyes and not opening them again. The Montana town buried him in their cemetery with a simple marker, Ethan Cross. He stood when standing cost everything. Word reached Silver Creek eventually. The town held a memorial service, adding his name to the monument in the square, not just for what he'd done there, but for what he'd represented. The the possibility of fighting back, the reminder that ordinary people could become extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. But here's the truth Ethan understood at the end. He wasn't extraordinary. None of them were. Not Thomas Marlowe, not Sarah, not Luis Cordero or Margaret Pritchard, or the 80 people who stood in that square. They were just humans who got angry enough to act, who cared enough to risk everything, who chose community over self-interest and justice over safety. That was the real victory. Not defeating Victor Hale, though that mattered. Not even transforming Silver Creek, though that mattered too. The victory was proving that change was possible, that tyrants weren't invincible, that fear could be overcome. Every person who stood in that square went home and told their story. Their children told others. The story spread like ripples across water, touching towns and lives far beyond Silver Creek. Each telling planted the same dangerous idea. You don't have to accept oppression. You can stand up, you can fight back, you can win. Not always, not easily, but possibly. And possibility was enough. Enough to inspire resistance in Colorado and Arizona, in a dozen mining towns where workers organized and demanded dignity. Enough to convince people that collective action worked better than lone heroics. Enough to shift the balance, however slightly, from tyrants toward communities. Silver Creek survived. Thrived, even. The mines eventually closed as veins played out, but the town adapted. Became a place people chose to live rather than were trapped by circumstance. The library still stands, still teaching children about Thomas Marlowe and Ethan Cross, and everyone who refused to accept that, might makes right. The monument in the square still lists names. Visitors still read them, wondering about the ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And somewhere in some town facing its own tyrant, someone hears the story of Silver Creek. Hears about 80 scared people standing together. Hears that resistance is possible. And maybe, just maybe, they choose to stand too. That's the legacy. Not monuments or legends, but the perpetual reminder that fear doesn't have to win. That communities are stronger than individuals. That standing together beats kneeling alone. Ethan Cross understood this at the end. Understood that he was never the hero of this story. The hero was the idea that ordinary people had power. The hero was every person who chose courage over comfort, who risked safety for justice, who stood when standing cost everything. He was just the match that lit the fire. Silver Creek carried the flame, and the flame spread.